Good afternoon and welcome to the June 14th meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority, being called to order at 2:06 p.m. May we have roll call, please?
Authority member Ajinian,
Present.
Agajanian,
Present.
Devine,
Here.
Kasakian, Najarian,
Here.
Parazian,
Here.
and Chair Brotman.
Here.
And this is a joint, calling to order the joint meeting of the City Council and Housing Authority. Let's have roll call for council, please.
Councilmember Agajanian,
Present.
Brotman,
Here.
Devine,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Najarian,
Here.
and Mayor Kasakian.
All right. Thank you and welcome, everyone. Our Mayor Kasakian is not going to be with us today through the afternoon and the evening meetings. Would you please read the notice of the meeting?
The agenda for the Tuesday, June 14th, 2022 joint public meeting of the City Council and Housing Authority was posted on June 8th, 2022 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And what's the first item?
First item will be Community Service and Parks regarding fiscal year 2022-2023 proposed annual action plan for Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, Emergency Solutions Grant and Home Investment Partnership Act programs. 1, council resolution adopting a final negative declaration. 2, council motion to approve fiscal year 22 and 23 CDBG, ESG, and Home Annual Action Plan totaling $3,529,800. Authorize submission of the annual action plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development as recommended by the CDBG Advisory Committee and now modified by staff and the Glendale Homeless Continuum of Care Board, and authorize the city manager or designee to redirect excess, canceled, or unused program funds under $50,000 from one project to another with CDBG Advisory Committee approval. 3 would be Housing Authority motion to approve fiscal year 22-23 CDBG, ESG, and Home Annual Action Plan totaling $3,529,800 and authorize submission of the annual action plan to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development as recommended by the CDBG Advisory Committee and modified by staff and Glendale Homeless Continuum of Care Board.
Thank you. Mr. Galanian.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Najarian, members of City Council, Housing Chair Authority Brotman, members of the Housing Authority. I'm just going to turn it over to Maggie Kavarian, our Senior Community Services Supervisor, to present these action plans for your consideration.
Thank you, City Manager. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Najarian, members of the City Council, members of the Housing Authority. Today, we're going to have a very brief presentation on the results of the 2022-2023 Annual Action Plan for CDBG, ESG, and the Home Program. We'll go ahead and get started, and the 3 programs are here with a breakdown of allocation of $3.5 million for this fiscal year, this coming fiscal year from HUD. That includes Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, $1.7 million, slight reduction this year from last year. And then the Emergency Solutions Grant, again, a slight reduction from $170,000 last year to $161,000 this year. And then the Home Program that got a slight bump, up from $1.4 million to $1.5 million this coming year. Each year we start our program planning pretty early in September. We host a CDBG open house. This is a recommendation made by the City Council a few years back to offer up more information on how the CDBG program works to nonprofits in our community. Also, in October and November, we basically establish our program priorities for the year, and we present them to the City Council and the Housing Authority in November. And then in November and December, we release the RFP to community agencies, and then the staff begin to review the proposals that are submitted. We had a meeting in March, a 2-day meeting, an all-day meeting for our public social services programs. And then again, the following week, we had one for our capital improvement projects, where the CDBG Advisory Committee met and interviewed and reviewed proposals. In April, we submitted those proposal recommendations and published them into the newspaper and for public review and comment, hosted 2 meetings. We hosted a virtual meeting as well as an in-person meeting this year. And then here we are today asking the council and the Housing Authority to approve the final plan. A breakdown of the CDBG program in particular. The CDBG program has three types. It's broken down into 3 parts. The Public Social Services Program, which has a 15% cap that can't be changed. So this year we had about $259,000 to allocate to public agencies. For capital improvements, it's about 65%, the bulk of the funding, $1.1, almost $1.2 million is appropriated this year. This also includes $666,000 in unappropriated fund balance from previous years, from 2015 to 2019 of unspent CDBG funds. Those can only be allocated to capital improvement projects. So it gave this particular capital improvement a little bit of a bump. And then lastly, the program administration, staff costs and whatnot to run the program and to review all the work that we do throughout the year. That's about $346,000 for a total of $1.7 million. So we had 14 proposals submitted by public agencies this year, with 11 community agencies recommended for funding from the CDBG Advisory Committee. We had 3 agencies that were not recommended for funding this year. All 3 work in youth program, after school programs. They are the Armenian Cultural Association, Hamaskayim. We also had Armenian Engineers and Scientists of America. They do a STEM academy. And then Boy Scouts of America, who do a Scout Reach program. This year, because funding was, the allocations came in and were released so late in the year that the committee decided to do a CDBG contingency plan. And this contingency plan would either increase or decrease funding to all the agencies that were recommended for funding, with the exception of the Housing Rights Center, and there's a reason for that. The Housing Rights Center is recommended for funding each year. They offer fair housing services. It's a mandatory program that we have. And also, half of that funding also comes from our housing division. So they receive $10,000 from CDBG and $10,000 from the housing division. So just to break down the types of public social services programs funded this year, about 50% were allocated to homeless services, about 30% to adult and senior counseling, legal services, and then 20% this year were recommended for funding for youth services, youth employment GYA program. Here is a breakdown. There were 14 agencies, like we had stated earlier, 3 not recommended and 11 recommended for funding. It was a very difficult year to make recommendations. We had $772,000 in requested funding, $500,000 short of what we had to offer. And then for capital improvement, we had 4 community agencies that submitted proposals, and all 4 were funded, and all 4 were recommended for funding, with 2 of the agencies fully receiving full funding. 2 agencies, again, we had the contingency plan. The committee decided that 2 agencies would either increase or get decreased funding based on the final allocations, and that was Campbell Center and YWCA equally. When the allocations were released, staff made a recommendation to reduce the CIP project that we have for the city, which is the Fremont Park renovation project, to reduce it from $400,000 down to $222,000 and give that funding back to the community agencies, which were Campbell Center and the YWCA, to allow them to move forward with their projects in the coming year. And again, here's a graph of how the recommended funding and the estimated funding and then the final funding kind of is broken down. And then we have the ESG program. ESG program is similar to the CDBG program, except that it's a 2-year plan, not a 1-year plan. And their recommendations are reviewed and approved by the Continuum of Care, the COC board. And they have to meet, the programs have to meet these outcomes and performance measures to get funding in the future year. So in 2021, the COC board approved funding recommendations for 3 agencies, and they will continue to receive funding, and the breakdown is as follows. We had Catholic Charities, YWCA, and Ascensia. All 3 agencies are recommended for funding. Again, 2-year plan, 21, 22, in the current year, and then the upcoming year. And then we have a breakdown of what's the increase or decrease. There was about an $8,700, $8,800 decrease in total allocation this year. So this is the framework of this program. Next, we have the home program. The home program is a little different. They have a pot of money that they hold on to, and then they develop affordable housing projects and programs as they see fit. So this year, they received a little under $1.6 million. Part of that money goes to program administration, and then the bulk of it goes to their projects. And then what we wanted to do this year was to highlight past allocations that are now being home-funded projects, partially home-funded projects. So Harrower Village and Citrus Crossing both have, which are upcoming, have $1.8 million in home funds invested. And then 515 Pioneer has about $2.17 million in home funds invested, and they're moving forward with those projects. So this afternoon, our recommendation to the Council and the Housing Authority is to adopt a negative declaration and approve the plan for the 22-23 fiscal year. Also in attendance today, we have our CDBG Chair, Ronnie Garibian, and our Vice Chair, Anita Quinones Cabrelian. So this concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Do we have any callers?
Mayor Pro Tem, I do have a caller. I'm waiting until the name gets written.
Okay,
I do.
let's hear from the caller.
Ray Morales, you have 3 minutes. Ray, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Ray, and I'm a part of the Anchor Church. Our church has members all over, and we speak for the people all over SoCal. We come to speak out on behalf of our neighbors nearby. Glendale deserves more than this in terms of housing. I mean, it's a lot of units, but none of it's affordable. People should be able to work a normal job and raise their families and afford to live here. Please keep those people in mind. Don't let this project go through, and thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure that was directly related to this presentation. Anyone else, Ara?
You know, there's calls in the queue. I think they're having a little bit of technical difficulties. As soon as I find out,
Okay.
I will
Well,
let
while you work on that, let me ask if there's any questions from the council or authority member.
Yes.
Mr. Agajan.
I'm looking at the organization, Armenian Engineers and Scientists of America, which I have been the president of it, and this organization been around for 38 years. And why it has been kicked out?
Councilmember Agajanian, I wouldn't say they were kicked out.
That's the
They
way
were
it
not
is.
recommended for
They
funding.
get zero.
They were not, they are currently funded. All the agencies that submitted proposals did a fairly good job in their proposal submissions and review. It was just a very difficult year, $500,000 more than what we had to offer. And I think the committee, and they could probably speak to this, they decided to go towards the program priorities of homeless services, homeless prevention, food pantry, survivors of domestic violence, those types of programs, to assist those types of programs. I do want to tell the committee, explain to the council and to the Housing Authority that there will be future funds. Most likely in the fall and winter, we will have CARES Act funds, CDBG CARES Act funds that don't have a cap on public social services. And we expressed this to the committee as well. This could be anywhere upwards of $80,000. And those agencies that were not recommended for funding are more than eligible to apply and to receive funding then in the fall and winter months. The only stipulation with the CARES Act funding, it has to be a program that prevents, prepares for, or responds to pandemic. And after-school programs are a good response to the pandemic, so they would qualify. So for instance, the STEM Academy for Armenian engineers and scientists would be a qualifying agency.
Okay. See, just for the information of the public, although I have been the president and I have been member of this organization for 38 years, so as you can see, that organization is not getting a penny. So it's not because I'm a member of this council, there is some influence or anything. But my second question is, Boy Scout of America, in the past, I remember the same way you guys allocated 0 to Boy Scouts of America, and we allocated some money. Why this year again they have been eliminated if it's not kicked out?
Councilmember Agajanian, it's very similar to the Armenian Engineers and Scientists and the Armenian Cultural Association. The 3 agencies, including Boy Scouts, were after-school youth programs that were basically more enrichment classes and whatnot. And I think the committee decided to go towards the homeless services, adult counseling, food pantries, and survivors of domestic violence type programs. So really it was more the types of programs that they wanted to recommend funding to, not so much, they weren't picking and choosing because of a proposal that wasn't good or whatnot. But again, they can answer better than I can in their decision making.
But however, these are kind of established organizations. They are entitled to get something. I mean, the money, if they came forward, you know, they have to go through lots of, you know, paperwork and to present it. And somehow we are pushing them aside. I think that's not correct. Already we have only 11 organizations left. These are Glendalians. And I want to see that next year, when you are considering it, something to be allocated. You can't give some 80,000 to one or 68,000 or 107,000 and say they're not, they shouldn't get a penny out of this money. I think they have to be considered if they are legitimate, as I brought the example of 38 years experience, and they are doing, working in Glendale, trying to help whoever. We should not eliminate those, in my opinion. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agajanian. Any other questions?
Yeah, if I could
Councilmember
ask a
Brown?
couple things. So, thank you, Maggie, for all this, and definitely a big thanks to the CBDG Advisory Committee. Obviously, this process starts in September. We're now in June. I guess you're going to only get a few months breather, and then you start again. So it's a lot of work. So I really appreciate the committee's work on it and staff's work on it, and the Continuum of Care Board also. So I know, you know, these are tough decisions when you have to say no to an organization, but I also know that if you're just kind of giving everybody a very small amount, it's not necessarily enough for them to do much with. So sometimes it's better to kind of concentrate a little bit. And I believe, so a question for you is, last year we did give money to AESA and the Boy Scouts? Is that
We did.
right?
They
We
are
did.
currently funded this year, yes.
Okay.
In 2021, yes.
Okay, and it's possible, you're saying, maybe even likely, that we'll have additional funds that we can use to help them with their programs?
Highly likely, yes.
Okay. And then the thing you mentioned about the breakdown, 50% for homeless related, 30% for, I guess, adults and seniors, and 20% for youth. Where did that come from? Is that from the CDBG Advisory Committee, or is that
It is
from
actually,
HUD, or what?
Councilmember Brotman, if you look on page 11 of your packet, we break down the programs based on youth and teen programs, and we just basically crunch the numbers. So the 2 programs that were recommended for funding, for instance, CASPS and Glendale Youth Alliance, we take those totals and we base it off of the total allocation for public social services, and then that's how we get the breakdown of the types of programs we have.
So the breakdown is just an after the fact, that's where
After
we
the
ended
fact.
up, not, okay. So, I guess the only other thing is if we have a few minutes just to ask Mr. Garibian and Ms. Quinones Gabrielian, maybe just very briefly, what was your thinking in why you decided to focus on homelessness, homeless prevention, domestic violence, what was it, food pantries? If you could just give us a sense of that.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and councils. We do not pick them as if they are representing any specific category of homelessness or not. We just go through the recommendation of each agency of what they do. It just so happened to be in the end of the day, when all is said and done, the numbers show 50% is this or 20% is that. That's not picked or decided from beginning when we decide who to give to. So every agency individually gets analyzed, irrelevant of what their job is. Because if they came all the way there, they're qualified. So we don't discriminate. Is it youth program or homelessness or any other program? So we look at them all the same. But we do consider many factors to pick one or how much to allocate. One of the factors, obviously, not having enough money. That's a very, but beside that also, we see the agencies, is it running on 100% grant or is it only a small portion of it? Or also we see if that agency doesn't get the grant, do they get to shut down or they still are able to continue whether they're cash reserves or anything else? So we consider all those, and there are years, because it switches from year to year, that this agency probably needs more this year versus that agency because of not having enough funds. It's a double-edged sword that it's, yes, we get more agencies applying, which is great, but at the same time, the higher that number goes, the more we have to cut because the funds doesn't get any higher. It's just a requirement that they apply for. So we do consider a lot. I'm sure you guys seen the videos. It goes on among 5 of us. We battle to come up to an understanding. So it'd be a uniformed recommendation versus one of us or 2 of us be able to do otherwise. We try to keep it the standard level. But yeah, many numbers and factors go into that one decision. So it's not, we don't pick homelessness or youth center or whatever it is, just the end of this will happen to be that percentage.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Anything to add, Ms. Quinones?
Thank you, colleague, commissioner, and Mr. Mayor Pro Temp and members of the City Council. By the time this comes to us and we make this decision, we've had our supporting staff put in an incredible amount of hours. And of course, it all starts out with the RFP and the organizations putting together packets that are probably about this thick, and then you have the staff goes through it, analyzes the weaknesses and the areas where we need some additional information. It's an iterative process. It goes back to the organizations. They get an opportunity to answer any questions that staff may have. When we start looking and analyzing each of the proposals, the very first step is a financial analysis of where they stand right now, how much they have been given in the previous year, how well are they executing the money that's been allocated to them. Many times, some of these organizations don't qualify because they just have not been able to execute. So that's another, just one, additional, but he absolutely gave you many of the reasons that we look at. But if an organization is worthy, but they've not been able to execute, sometimes it's because the need may not be there. Maybe we've gone through a huge paradigm and the pandemic shifted some of the necessities. Every 5 years, we are responsible for oversight of a deep community needs assessment. And then every year, our staff does a check-in to see, are we still, is this 5-year deep analysis still, does it hold up for this year? We had a big change. We had big changes from child care organizations that really didn't need it because the parents were home and they had the children there and they were figuring out how to be co-parenting and working while the kids were there. So we had changes, and believe me, it's very difficult, but we look at CDBG program priorities and what may be the most needed areas where a small amount of money gets to be spread across, and that's what we do. I hope that answers it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah, I just want to say, it's more than just throwing a dart at a board.
No.
It's a lot more work, and I understand that as my husband served on that CDBG for many years, and I know how much work it is. Mike, thank you. My question is, I noticed that the staff is recommending to reduce the city's CIP Fremont Park renovation project funding allocation instead of accepting it. Can you tell me why that is? Why that was done?
Absolutely, Councilmember Devine, and I'll also invite Director of Community Services and Parks, Onig Bulanikian, up here to better explain it. We as staff met after the allocations were released, and we decided that Campbell Center and the YWCA were worthy organizations, and the reduction this year in funding was so much that for capital improvement projects, you need a certain amount to get the work done, and we felt that, Oni could probably better explain this, that the Fremont Park renovation project has funding sources. The committee also actually recommended in 23-24 another $400,000 in CDBG funding for the Fremont Park renovation project. So that slight reduction going towards the community agencies didn't seem to be too difficult, but I'm going to invite Onik to explain.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Najarian, members of the council, members of the Housing Authority. Basically, we have different funding sources for the Fremont Park project. We have general fund CIP, DIF, as well as Measure S. So depending on what the bids will be when they come back in the next month or so, or a couple months, we'll hopefully allocate additional Measure S funds or DIF funds. But we didn't want to use the CDBG funds for the community projects. There is a need for different CIP projects that are community-based, and hopefully the additional $200,000 that we're allocating to the funds will make those projects whole. So that was our intentions, to assist the nonprofit organizations needing those funds.
Thank you. I ask that because I think it's very commendable that you are allocating these funds to community, Essentia, what is it? I want to say that, is it the YW and Hamilton
Center.
House?
Campbell Center and YWC.
And who are really very much in need, and thank you so much for doing that. Appreciate
you.
it. And I'm sure they do too.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
thank you. And I understand we do not have any calls.
Correct, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, there for another item. Are there any other questions or discussion items? If not, what we have before us are two council items, a resolution and a motion, and then a separate housing authority motion.
Okay.
Would someone like to move the council items?
Yes, for council, move the item.
Okay, the resolution and the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Agajanian,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Devine,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Najarian,
Yes.
and Mayor Kasakian.
Okay, and then for the Housing Authority, we have a motion to approve
I'll move
the
the
annual
item.
action plan.
I'll move the item.
Second.
Okay, and roll call, please?
Authority Member Agajanian,
Yes.
Agajanian,
Yes.
Devine,
Yes.
Kasakian, Najarian,
Yes.
Barazian,
Yes.
and Chair Brotman.
Yes.
And Mayor, if I may, I just want to thank the CDBG committee those of you that are here today and those that aren't here today for all the hours that you put into this, because I know it takes a lot of time, a lot of decisions have to be made, and it's not an easy job. Thank you all.
And all you get is a reception once a year where we offer Portos and a few pens and
Donuts.
pads of paper. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, what is the next item?
2 would be community development regarding adoption of fiscal year 22-23 Glendale Housing Authority budget with approval of a professional service contract amendment with Emphasis Software. Council resolution making findings and approving expenditures of low moderate income housing asset fund for administration and planning expenditures outside redevelopment project areas for the fiscal year 22-23 Housing Authority budget. 2 would be Housing Authority resolution making findings and improving expenditures of low moderate income housing asset funds for administration and planning and expenditures outside redevelopment project areas for the fiscal year 22-23 Housing Authority budget and adopting fiscal year 22-23 Housing Authority budget. 3 would be Housing Authority motion to approve an amendment to the professional service agreement with Emphasis Software to increase the contract amount by $77,418 for a new not-to-exceed contract of $486,425 for a computer software license with maintenance and hosting of the Housing Authority owner portal, and to extend the agreement term for 1 year to end August 31st, 2023.
Mr. Galanian.
Yes, so Mayor Pro Tem Najarian, members of the City Council, Chair Brotman, members of the Housing Authority, I'm going to invite John Toctalian, our Interim Director of Community Development, Deputy City Manager, to present the next fiscal year's Housing Authority budget for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian, and thank you, members of the council and the Housing Authority. I'm going to try to breeze through this presentation because many of you have already been through the detailed presentation as part of our budget study sessions. I believe it was part of budget study session number 2 on May 3rd. And I'm hoping that some of the Housing Authority members had an opportunity to watch that. If not, we can certainly delve into some more of the details. With respect to our, should be working. Thank you. With respect to our housing division, the housing division really primarily focuses on 3 separate functions within their operation. The first would be management of our federally funded Section 8 program. The next is housing development and preservation, as we've seen so many projects brought before this council and housing authority in the last couple of years with respect to low, moderate income, low income housing opportunities. And the final aspect of their operations has to do with housing services. That's managing a variety of different programs developed by staff in conjunction with our city council for things like the rental rights program, the monthly housing subsidy program, LifeWrap, and ListWrap, which is the low-income student housing programs. The housing department has a variety of funds that we discussed in great detail, and you'll see some numbers attached to these in the next slide. The first would be the Housing Assistance Fund that primarily funds our Section 8 program. The Home Grant Fund is the fund that we use for the development and preservation of a variety of different housing opportunities in the city. Continued Care Grant Program or Fund is a program fund that we use in conjunction with Community Services and Parks for dealing with a variety of our homeless programs in terms of housing them. Affordable Housing Trust Fund is where we deposit our inclusionary housing fees. Our Begin Affordable Homeownership Fund is a fund that we use for first-time home buyers, a fund that helps them with their initial down payment on a property. The Low Moderate Income Housing Assistance Fund is where the 20% of the redevelopment repayment funds go. And the Housing Mitigation Fee Fund is where we develop our commercial development impact fees from projects that are proposed to be built in the city, have an impact. There's a calculation associated with that impact, and those funds get deposited in that account and used for housing purposes throughout the community. As promised, here are some numbers associated with those particular funds. Unless there's a desire to go through each one of these, I don't necessarily see a reason to. I will just indicate that at least on the first fund, Fund 2020, which is our Housing Assistance Fund, that number is rather large. We're anticipating a revenue of $50 million. That's really a reflection on what we should be getting based on the number of vouchers that we have. In fact, our funding annually is a little bit less than that, probably to the tune of $8 or $9 million. What we ask is that council actually appropriate the full amount that we would be entitled to if the vouchers were fully funded. In case we do get additional funding throughout the year, there wouldn't be a need to come back and ask for an additional appropriation. If we don't get the full funding that the vouchers are entitled to, then the program would only fund up to what the federal government provides us in terms of vouchers. It's really, this is just an opportunity for us to be a little bit more efficient in the number of times we have to come back to council. And the other thing that I'll point out on Fund 2040, the Continuum of Care Grant funds, you'll notice that there aren't any new funds proposed for next fiscal year. That's not because we don't have an active program in that fund. It's because the 2020 Continuum of Care funds in the amount of $2.4 million were actually received in May of 2022. So we actually have we have the funding. We're carrying that over to the next fiscal year. We're not asking for anything in addition to the $2.741 million that's already in that account. That's what we feel we can go through in the next 12 months. That describes the budget. That's just one aspect of what we're asking council to consider approving here tonight. The second aspect of what we're asking council to consider is the amendment with a software company called Emphasis Software. This is a software that our housing department uses to manage our housing programs, primarily Section 8. It's a program, or it's a software that ties in a number of different agencies, as well as the renter, the housing authority, HUD, and with all the various different regulations constantly changing at the federal level, it's the company and the software actually updates all of that information. So everything that we get, our ability to communicate, our ability to manage the Section 8 program's funding and payment to landlords is seamless. Important to note that some of the other larger agencies also use Emphasis Software. Primarily, I want to say it was Santa Monica. No. City of LA for sure, the Housing Authority of City of LA, Anaheim, Long Beach, and San Diego County. The important thing with the City of LA using the software is because we have a very large number of ports or portable clients from that agency, where they're still a client of LA living in Glendale. We actually end up paying the rents, but we have to be able to communicate with LA on a monthly basis to reconcile all of that. The fact that both of us are on the same system is very helpful. It's an annual 1-year amendment request to the tune of $77,418. That brings the total with this particular vendor up to $486,000 over the last several years. And I also anticipate that as long as we're in this business and as long as the other agencies are still using this particular software, we would continue to ask to continue our relationship with them in future years. So with that, we have 3 alternatives for council to consider, as was outlined in the report. What we ask is that council adopt alternative number 1, not just council, but the housing authority as well. It's not only adopting the proposed budget, but also adopting the resolution, making the findings to be able to use the low moderate income housing funds to administer our planning and expenditures outside of the redevelopment project areas. And the final piece of alternative number 1 would be also the approval of the Emphasis Software amendment. With that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions with the team from Housing, if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Tiktalia. Councilmember Brotman.
Yeah, just 2 things. One, the software, is that paid for by HUD through the Section 8 program, or what? Do you know?
I'm told yes.
Yes, okay. And can you just explain a little bit more the point you made about appropriating the full, like, I think about 50 million, but we get less? Is that a normal thing? And why do we get, what happens if we don't get that fully funded? How do we handle those vouchers?
Certainly, and I'll ask maybe our staff to come forward in case I'm not able to fully address that. Yeah, Arthur, you. But essentially, we have a total number of vouchers from the federal government. It's an actual number of vouchers, but they're not all fully funded by the federal government on an annual basis. We only get a certain amount, just like all other housing agencies. If we don't get the full amount of the $50 million, our program essentially caps out with the total funding that we have available. So, I'm just gonna make up numbers now. If we had 1,000 vouchers, but we only got funding for 900 of them, we would issue those 900 vouchers and we would make good on them. We would have the capacity to take on to issue additional vouchers if the funding from the federal government came in at a later date.
We
They don't-
already have people with vouchers in apartments. So what
Correct.
happens if we don't get the funding? We have to cut them off? I doubt
Well,
that happens.
again, I'll look to Arthur, and I wish Peter Zobak was here to be able to address the specific questions, but that's the reason why we have reserves in the accounts as well. We don't anticipate that we would ever get any less than what we got the previous year. If that were the case, we would be able to anticipate that coming and be able to kind of manage for that. What I'm referring to is on an annual basis, we have a set number of vouchers that we're entitled to, but we don't get fully funded for those. That difference in the vouchers that aren't funded, because they're not in people's hands, there wouldn't be an impact to actually anybody who's in a rental unit. But to your point, I mean, if we were to lose 50% of our funding overnight, yes, we would have to look at making adjustments in the program long term. I don't want to raise any alarm or any red
No,
flags. That's not where we're at.
I understand. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any callers?
Mayor Pro Tem, we do not have any callers.
Okay, do we have any other comments on these two items? It's three items. Okay, we have a council resolution.
I will move the 3 items on for council.
So two are housing, so only one is for council.
One is
Oh, yeah,
council.
sorry, yes.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Agajanian,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Devine,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Najarian,
Yes.
and Mayor Kasakian.
And I'll move items 2 and 3.
Second.
Authority Member Ajinian,
Yes.
Agajanian,
Yes.
Devine,
Yes.
Kasakian, Najarian,
Yes.
Parazian,
Yes.
Chair Brotman.
Yes.
Thank you, and that concludes the business items for this joint meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn for council?
So moved.
Second.
Council's adjourned.
And for housing?
So moved.
Okay, housing is adjourned 2:48 PM.
Switching to special.
Whenever they're ready. All right.
Ready?
Are they ready? Are they
Ready.
up and rolling? Okay, thank you. I call to order the special meeting of the Glendale City Council for June 14th, 2022. May we have roll call?
Councilmember Agajanian,
Present.
Brotman,
Whoops, here.
Devine,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Najarian,
Here.
and Mayor Kasakian.
May we have your report?
The agenda for the Tuesday, June 14th, 2022 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on June 8th, 2022 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And what's the first item?
Item number 1 is community development regarding request for approval of Stage 2 final design review and development agreement for a new 294-unit, 24-story multifamily residential project, Lucia Park, located at 620 North Brand Boulevard and 625 North Maryland Avenue. 1 is resolution adopting the Sustainable Communities Environmental Assessment and Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program for the Lucille Park project. 2, motion to approve Stage 2 design review. 3, introduction of ordinance for development agreement. 4, motion continuing the matter until June 28th, 2022, and directing the city attorney to prepare findings in support of denial of Stage 2 design review.
Thank you, Mr. Golanian.
Staff that's been working on this. We are going to kick it off with Vilya Zemetaitis, our principal planner, and she will be ably assisted by Bradley Calvert, our Assistant Director of Community Development, Jillian Van Meiden, who's been working on the legal and environmental aspects of this development, who's the Chief Assistant City Attorney, as well as Jay Platt, our other principal planner. And as you see, we also have the development team in the chambers for a presentation on their part. With that, Ms. Zemetaitis.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian. Mayor Pro Tem Najarian, council members. Proposed for you today is a new high-rise project in the downtown specific plan area. The project is located at 620 North Brand Boulevard and 625 North Maryland Avenue. The project proposal includes maintaining the existing 6-story Chase Bank building on the corner of Brand and the 134 on-ramp, to demolish the existing 2-level parking garage located on Maryland Avenue and also a 2-story commercial office building on that same side of the street, and to construct a new 24-story, 294-unit high-rise building, and this would be on the east side of the 1.4-acre project site, again zoned downtown specific plan Gateway District, which is the district in the DSP that allows for the tallest buildings in Glendale. Project complies with our parking sections, provides the required replacement parking for the parking garage for the commercial building. It includes residential parking as well. And the project also features a very significant, large, publicly accessible open space along Brand Boulevard. Before council today are 3 items. One would be the environmental review, which would be the Sustainable Community Environmental Assessment. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the PowerPoint presentation. 2 would be the Stage 2 final design review. The packet itself has been already reviewed by the Design Review Board back on January 13th and by the Historic Preservation Commission on January 20th. Project also includes a development agreement for a 6-year entitlement period and to freeze the development impact fees. This development agreement has also been reviewed by our Planning Commission back on February the 2nd. Comments from the Design Review Board, from the Historic Preservation Commission, and from the Planning Commission were all included in the staff report and as exhibits as well. To provide a little bit of context for the project, you'll note that the project site is highlighted in yellow. It is located, as mentioned, on the corner of Brand and the 134 freeway. The 134 freeway is to the north. And you'll note that Brand and Central and Louise, and the project site is located just north of Duran. This photograph provides an aerial context looking northeast of the project site. You'll notice that the Chase Bank building is highlighted. That is being proposed for the preservation, and the building will be maintained on the project site. That is not proposed for demolition. I believe a number of comment letters assumed that the Chase Bank building was to be demolished. That's not the case. They are proposing to maintain the existing bank building. There also is a bank just on the south, just to the south of the project site. This would be 600 North Brand Boulevard, and that's shown in context as well. Just to briefly go back, as mentioned, the DSP features the tallest buildings in the Glendale downtown area. This would include the 450 North Brand Boulevard, the 550 North Brand Boulevard. You'll notice those are the 2 buildings just south along Brand Boulevard. It also includes what used to be called the Nestle Building north of Brand Boulevard, and the Unum Provident building, which is the tallest building in downtown, is located just outside of this aerial image along Central in the 134 freeway. Yes?
Ms. Zemetaitis, I'm sorry. Let me make a disclosure that I have my law office located in that building at 500 North Brand, which is at the lower right of the slide that you have. I am a subtenant, and it is not foreseeable that any action we take on this site would affect the value of my sublease or my, I guess, of my sublease or my interest in that. So I meant to say that at the front, but you had that graphic out, so it fit. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you. Before you is a zoning map, essentially, of the DSP. The buildings outlined somewhat in beige with the building footprints is the DSP district. And directly to the east is a high-density residential zone, the R1250, and this would be the neighborhood between Glendale Boulevard and Brand Boulevard as well. You'll note also a few streetscape images of the project site, the Chase Bank building on the far left-hand side to the top, the building to the south at the bottom on the left-hand side, and the images on the right-hand side are images of the streetscape taken from Maryland Avenue. This is a streetscape image looking directly east of the project site, Chase Bank building to be maintained, the adjacent 600 North Brand Boulevard on the right-hand side, and the parking garage in question is highlighted in red. So this is the parking garage that would be demolished to make way for the project. Back in January of 2020, right before COVID, the Stage 1 preliminary design review was presented to City Council for your consideration. It obviously featured a very sculptural building form, rather tall, just under the limit in the DSP, just under 380 square feet. This would have been one of two of the tallest buildings, besides the Unum Provident building, in the downtown skyline. That project featured 32 stories, 348 residential units, and apologies, it's a 350-foot tall building. The project requested additional height as part of the community benefits program as a Tier 3 mixed residential type project. Council, following your review and public testimony, ultimately approved the Stage 1 preliminary design review with 3 conditions. First was to reduce the overall height of the building, and then to move all of the residential parking below grade. Currently, our code requires that all parking for residential uses be either subterranean or semi-subterranean. The Stage 1 proposal actually had the parking proposed above grade, and this would have been either a density bonus concession or some sort of waiver or variance. The second item was to provide more information regarding the scaling, the scoring, the material, to ensure that there's a human scaled quality to the project itself in compliance with the intent of the DSP standards. And the third was to consider revising the design of the project to better fit the existing Chase Bank building that was to be maintained. The development team heard council's considerations and comments and resubmitted a project completely having redesigned the scope of the multifamily residential project to be much more rectilinear in form. They've lowered the height from 32 stories to 24 stories. They've reduced the overall height from 350 feet in height down to 266 feet. They've reduced the overall unit count from 348 units to 294 units. And again, what you see before you is a major design revision to the project from the sculptural taller building form proposed under Stage 1. Here before you is an aerial view looking northeast of the project site, and this would be looking south along Brand Boulevard. The Los Angeles downtown skyline is located at the far right-hand side. You'll note that you'll have the Bank of America building on the westerly side, or in this case, the right-hand side of Brand Boulevard. And forgive me, since I don't have a mouse or a clicker, I can't highlight the location of the proposed project, but you'll note that the 2 existing buildings along Brand are being maintained, and the building is featured directly to the east, or in this case, to the left-hand side of the 2 buildings to be maintained. Here is an aerial image looking northeast of the project site. Again, the 2 buildings in the foreground, the proposed project in the background, and you'll notice that there's Monterey Towers, which is a multifamily residential project site located directly north of the project site and north of the 134 freeway. And you'll also see the previous Nestle building in the background as well. The existing site plan, as mentioned, features the Chase Bank building in blue that's to be maintained, a 2-story commercial office building at 625 North Maryland to be demolished, and the existing parking garage also addressed in this case as 620, but it should be 621 North Maryland Avenue, but it's grouped with 620 North Brand Boulevard, Chase Bank building. Proposed site plan is driven by the maintenance of the existing bank building, also the publicly accessible open space courtyard is proposed at the location of the current parking lot that's fronting Brand Boulevard. The project itself, it addresses the DSP frontage requirements for primary frontages along Brand Boulevard and also the mixed-use residential street frontage along Maryland Avenue. So it does provide the 16-foot required setback along Maryland Avenue. Again, this is highlighting the bank building, the building footprint of the proposed project. This would be the open space greenery and publicly accessible open space around the existing Chase Bank building and then the parking lot. And then vehicular entrances are located off of Maryland Avenue. So there is pedestrian access through the publicly accessible open space to the lobby of the building at the ground level, but all vehicular entrance and exiting would take place off of Maryland, and this would be both for the commercial and residential users. The publicly accessible open space, as mentioned, is rather substantial. It's almost 7,000 square feet. It's 83 feet wide by 125 feet deep. It is approximately 10% of the 1.4 acre site, and it is in compliance with the DSP. The project site is open to the sky in compliance. You'll notice there's just an architectural element, but that's just a minor part. It is open to the sky, it'll be open to the public, and it complies with the courtyard open space requirements. Project also complies with the open space requirements in general for the project site, which would be 20% of the lot area. So it provides open space in the form of a little area additional on the ground level, as well as open spaces on the 4th floor for a deck and a pool deck as well, and it includes the rooftop amenities in addition. Again, this would also include the residential open space. For this particular project and for all projects in the DSP, there is a residential open space requirement of 140 square feet per unit. So the project itself would have to provide 41,000 square feet of residential open space. Here you'll notice an image of the rooftop deck at just over 9,100 square feet. Parking. So again, this was a point made by City Council, move all of the residential parking below grade. They are now providing 4 levels of subterranean parking required by code for the 247 one-bedroom units, 1 parking space, and for the 47 two-bedroom units, 2 parking spaces, and guest spaces, 1 guest space for every 10 residential units. And they are providing 373 parking spaces below grade. Here you'll notice the ground level site plan. The lobby area is highlighted in yellow. You'll note that the arrows in blue show the vehicular access to the parking garage. The building itself at grade is 32.5 feet set back from the bank building, and also approximately 34 feet set back from the building just directly to the south at 600 North Brand. Above grade parking, you have 2 levels of above grade parking. Again, this is for the replacement of the commercial parking. They are required by code to provide 94 spaces. They are providing 129 spaces. This is more in keeping with the existing parking garage of 2 levels. So this is more one-on-one replacement as opposed to what the minimum requirements for the bank building itself. Shown on the screen is the podium deck, level 4. You'll note that the pool is proposed on the northeast corner of the building. There's another deck amenity space on the west-hand side overlooking the publicly accessible open space. Above the fourth level, the building is set back from the Chase Bank building approximately 47.5 feet. So the building does taper up the higher you go and away from the bank building. Typical levels 5 through 18, you'll note again the building is tapering off, and there's a much more substantial setback from the building directly to the south and a 47.5 foot setback from the existing Chase Bank building on the project site. Note also the elevators in the central lobby area. I'm going to go into it a little bit later on, but the building massing is shifted more at an axis. So it isn't just a straight rectilinear building. The massing actually shifts north to south and east to west. Here you'll note the levels 23, 24 on the rooftop deck, generous rooftop deck amenities on the 23rd floor, a smaller deck on the 24th, and you'll note that there are solar panels proposed. And sincerest apologies, this is the nightmare of all presenters. Okay, so going back to the slide, the west elevation facing Brand, you'll note that I'm going to go in a little bit onto the DSP compliance in a future slide, but as the building rises from the bottom to the top, there's distinctions in the building forms and the massing itself. Here you'll note that the east elevation, this would be facing Maryland Avenue, and this would feature the vehicular entrance to the parking garages. North elevation, this would be the elevation facing the 134 freeway, what essentially all of the individuals going east and west on the 134, what they would see. And on the south elevation facing Durand. So, in terms of the DSP compliance, the DSP has very specific criteria and standards for taller buildings. It requires that the building be divided into tripartites. You'll note that the base is features the fins that harken back to the existing Chase Bank building. It's a limestone base. The fins that are screening the 2 levels of parking garage for the commercial use. Above that, you'll note the levels that feature a combination of vision glass and spandrel glass. There's a grid form, again, sort of hearkening back to the rectilinear forms of the Chase Bank building, and it's topped by the loggia at the crown, if you will, of the rooftop deck frame structure. Going back to the actual building massing and how the 2 building forms are offset, there's a requirement that there be a substantial modulation in the building form every 150 feet, and this building does provide that. There have been some comments made that the building doesn't comply with the taller building standards in the DSP, and note that the DSP design memo, which was Exhibit 2 in your staff report, went into great detail and great depth to show how the project does comply with the various standards. The east-west section parallel to the 134. Again, it features the 20-foot setback required above the 60-foot limit. So this would be an additional setback from Maryland Avenues to sort of better relate to the lower scale buildings to the east. You'll note the 47.5-foot setback from the Chase Bank building and the 30-foot setback for the 2 levels of the parking garage. This would be the north and south section. So this would be parallel to Brand Boulevard. You'll note that the building tapers up. It complies with the 15-foot minimum reduction in the floor plates above the 200-foot limit. Taller, narrower buildings. So by having taller, narrower buildings, we're allowed to get more publicly accessible open space at the base. These are just a few quick design standards in compliance with the Council's requirement to provide additional detailing on the scoring and materials. You'll note that here are fins and a rather unique lobby entrance detail, section window drawings. Included was a lighting plan that was consistent with the contemporary style of the building, and also landscaping plans before you. This would be of the deck. Here you'll note some aerial images superimposed of what the building would look like, again, in relation to the downtown skyline in Glendale. Top image looking north or southeast. The image on the bottom right would be the image looking southwest towards Griffith Park, and also a nighttime rendering as well on the bottom. Here you have two images showing the project proposal in relation at the ground floor, the top left in regards to the Chase Bank building. So you'll note the fin type of architectural elements that harken back to the Chase Bank buildings and the modulation, and the mullions. In this case, the Chase Bank building has poured in place concrete mullions. Also, the bank, or I should say the project site looking south on Maryland Avenue, and again, you'll note the architectural design of the base. Project was presented to Design Review again on January 13th, Historic Preservation Commission on January 20th. Comments are being presented for City Council's consideration, and there was a detailed design memo from staff with regards to the DSP compliance. DRB was supportive of the project. They had a number of other comments. One of the comments included perhaps relocating the pool deck instead of at the northeast corner of the project site, to relocate the pool deck on the southwest corner of the podium. In regards to also, there was some discussion, what about drop-off locations along Maryland Avenue? And also, I believe to my notes here, some comments regarding ensuring that there be access for commercial and residential, perhaps considering breaking up the commercial and residential access in terms of the elevators, since all of the parking is being proposed in the one particular project. Ultimately, the Design Review Board supported staff's conditions, the first being to enhance paving at driveways and to set back the garage doors. Two would be to perhaps propose lighting to better illuminate the rooftop loggia element. Third was to provide metal mesh or some sort of screening behind the fins for the commercial parking to better screen the parking garage. Fourth was to propose perhaps a different pattern installation of the limestone base at the tile, or even another material. And the fifth was to incorporate spandrel glass as part of that middle curtain system of the bank building, but it turns out that that's already being proposed. So essentially that fifth condition is moot, okay? Design Review Board included added two additional conditions. One would be to enhance the programming of the publicly accessible open space and to include perhaps more landscape planners. That would be to better relate to the residential users, the commercial users, and the general public, and to essentially soften that appearance of that publicly accessible open space plaza. Note that there is a fire lane that is required in that publicly accessible open space. They cannot have fixed planters. They can have outdoor furniture at that location and movable planters, but that fire lane would have to be maintained per the Glendale Fire Department requirements. The last condition was to perhaps redesign the vertical fins to, again, to be more consistent with the design language of the project. The following week, the project was presented to the Glendale Historic Preservation Commission. There was quite a bit of discussion with regards to historic issues. Ultimately, the HPC voted 3-1 to recommend that City Council not approve the project. There were great concerns with regards to the demolition of the two-level parking garage. Majority found that the parking garage is historically significant to the project site, and its demolition would be an impact. They also voiced concerns regarding the size and the scale and the massing of the proposed project in relation to the Chase Bank building. Also, they felt that because, in their opinion, the demolition of the two-level parking garage would be an impact on the historic resource, that an EIR, an environmental impact report, should be required, and that a SKIA was not applicable. We'll go into a little bit more detail with regards to those comments later on in the PowerPoint presentation. Again, staff, based on the record, has determined, and we still uphold the determination, that the garage is not historic and that its demolition is not a significant and unavoidable CEQA impact. And again, this is in regards to the utilitarian function of the garage, the quality of workmanship, and we will go into that a little bit later on in the parking. But you'll note here, this is a slide image of the two-level parking garage facing Maryland Avenue with the Chase Bank building in the background, and a photo detail of the parking structure and a photo detail of the bank building with the poured-in-place concrete. Should council choose to approve the project, HPC recommended a number of conditions. One was to eliminate and redesign. There's a branding name on one of the patio, on the sort of an architectural element on the publicly accessible open space, to redesign that or to eliminate it altogether. They also called for the redesign of the fins rather than just installing a mesh behind the fins to screen the parking garage. They also are proposing to add more shade trees rather than palms at the publicly accessible open space courtyard, to essentially eliminate the limestone cladding at the base of the building and replace it perhaps with something more appropriate, such as granite. And that upon completion of the project, that the Chase Bank building be nominated to the National and Glendale registers. So, which brings us to the development agreement. The development agreement is being requested by the developer for a 6-year term. By code, all entitlements are valid for a period of 2 years with a 1-year time extension that's available. So for a total of 3 years, they are requesting an additional 3 years for their entitlement period. The DA, or in the development agreement, would also lock in the current development impact fees. This would include the inclusionary housing fee. This project is not going for a density bonus. It does include it is in compliance with the inclusionary housing requirement. Our municipal code specifies that the inclusionary housing can either be provided on site or in payment in lieu fees. The developer at this point is choosing to pay the in lieu fees of approximately $13.5 million, and this would go into the housing fee to then allow the city to develop affordable housing. The additional time is being requested to ride out, again, the post-COVID financial instability that the entire global economy is experiencing, and to secure financing for the project. The development agreement, as required by state statute, was presented to the Planning Commission on February 2nd. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the development agreement with one condition: that the owner and the applicant reach out to the skilled labor unions regarding the local hiring for construction. And the developer has done that, and I believe that they are ready to address that issue as well. The development agreement complies with all of the required findings, and again, we included a copy of the Planning Commission's resolution as Exhibit 5. Last but not least, the environmental review for the project. Rather than an environmental impact report or a mitigated negative declaration, this project is eligible for a newer type of environmental review per Senate Bill 375, which allows for streamlined environmental review for transit priority projects. This was the state's intent to encourage housing near transit to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So why is this project eligible for the SKIA? Because it meets the 4 required transit priority project criteria. One is that it is consistent with SCAG's regional transit goals, the general plan designation, and allowable densities and building FAR. It contains more than the 50% residential threshold limit. It provides in excess of the minimum 20 units per acre, and it is located within a half a mile of the major transit stop and high-quality transit corridors. And this went into great detail in terms of the SKIA, which was included as part of your staff report. SKIA itself featured an initial study that detailed all of the environmental factors that would be air quality, biological resources, historic resources, geology, greenhouse gas, and many others that I'm going to, at this point in time, not go into detail. But the SKIA also contained a number of studies, including a historic resource report, and all of those various studies were attached as appendices to the SKIA. Ultimately, the SKIA concluded that the project will not result in any new significant and unavoidable environmental impacts. Now, they don't have to look at cumulative impacts under the SKIA provisions, so they can rely on mitigation measures for previous EIRs, and this would be the EIR for the South Glendale Community Plan, the EIR for the Downtown Specific Plan, and the EIR for the SCAG, the Regional Transportation Plan as well. So again, the SKIA incorporates all of those applicable mitigation measures to reduce the environmental impacts to less than significant. Project-specific and cumulative impacts, as noted, from car and light-duty trucks also need not be addressed as part of the SKIA, and the SKIA is reviewed under the substantial evidence rather than the fair argument standard. SKIA was presented to the public. It was available on the city's website, and notices were sent out with regards to the draft review, notice of availability, notice of intent, from January 18th to February 17th. That review period was then extended to March 10th, so an additional, a little more than 3 weeks. Total of 6 comment letters were received. The responses to comments were included as part of the council staff report. And again, all of the documents, the appendices, the other documents related to the SKIA are available and will be available on the Planning Division's website, www.glendaleca.gov/environmental. So how is this different than an EIR? All of the various studies and all of the various analysis would be the same as you would for an EIR. We just do not have alternative sections, and this is based on the SKIA provisions. So going back to the responses to comments, the 6 comment letters were received. Again, this is under the substantial evidence standard and not the fair argument standard. 2 of those letters, one from the Glendale Historical Society and one from Francesca Smith, were received. Comments specify that the garage is a historic resource and that it is a character defining feature of the historic bank building, and therefore demolition would be a significant environmental impact, and the SKIA is not applicable. We had 4 other remaining letters dealing with air quality, greenhouse gas, public health, noise, construction noise, and specifically, and traffic. And again, thorough analysis and the responses to comment that no substantial evidence was presented in these 4 additional comment letters, and that the project would not result in any significant and unavoidable impacts. Responses to comments in terms of historic eligibility. All parties agree the Chase Bank building is eligible. And I'm going to continue on. The parking garage and the survey was somewhat silent, but that has been updated. So there is a letter from the Historic Resources Group which updates our analysis, and that was included as Appendix I in the SKIA. That the garage was visually somewhat is consistent, but it's utilitarian and ancillary to the bank building. It lacks the design and material of the historic resources. The fins were surface application, not a precast concrete integral part of the bank building, and it's only on 2 sides. Staff all agree that the garage does not contribute to the significance of the post-war, the bank building, and that the parking structure does not contribute to the historic character and significance of the property. Conclusion, the SKIA has detailed assessments of the project potential impact on both on-site and off-site historic resources. Based on the appendices and the in-depth analysis, the SKIA concludes demolition of the garage and construction of the project will not be materially, would not be a material impact on the historic resource, and that the existing historic resource, the bank building, will remain eligible for historic listing. His responses to comments offered the detailed, thorough assessment, and City Council, as the lead agency, has the authority to determine whether or not you choose to move forward with the SKIA. Ultimately, staff has the recommendation to adopt the SKIA, to approve the Stage 2 final design review with conditions, and to approve the development agreement. That concludes staff's presentation. I know I do have some slides with regards to the various conditions that were proposed by the DRB, the HPC as well. So in case you'd like to go through them, because some of them might need a little bit, as opposed to having City Council consider, if you so choose to approve the project, and to group all of the conditions together, we will need a little bit more clarification, since some of the conditions are a little different from the HPC versus the DRB. But this ultimately concludes staff's presentation. Thank you for having patience in going through such a lengthy report, and your also due diligence in reading. I believe the staff report was over 2,000 pages as well, so.
Thank you.
Much
Thank you for your
appreciated.
presentation and all your work on this report and the documents. We have 10 cards and about 10 callers.
At this point, it's 14 callers.
14 callers. Does council have any questions before we turn to public comment?
I'd like to hear the comments from.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, but I'd rather.
So I'm going to, in light of the, what do we have, 25 comments or so?
24 altogether. Would you like to give 3 minutes, 2 minutes?
I'd like to go 2 minutes.
Would you like to start with the cards or the phone calls?
Let's start with the cards, please. And the first speaker is John Friedman. Would you like to come forward? Do you have a team? And who is your team that submitted cards?
Mayor Pro Tem, we have John Friedman and myself that will be speaking on behalf of the project team. We also have other members of our team that will not be speaking, but will be here to answer questions.
Okay. Can I put Mr. Maniscalchi's card with yours? With Mr. Friedman's, or would you like separate time?
In terms
Is he
of,
part of your group, or?
can I ask a question back?
Sure.
How much time, when you say 2 or 3 minutes, I'm assuming that's for those in support and opposition. In terms of the applicant team, is there a specific time that you were going to give us?
I'd like to give you maybe 10 minutes. Does that make sense, Mr. City Attorney? And then is there who do I give 10 minutes to on the other side, if anyone?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, given that there's no appellant,
Right.
you're not required to give any other
Right.
applicant. I would recommend 10 or 15 minutes, depending on the amount of time that they estimate they might need.
How much time do you need? Let me ask that.
We would ask for 15 minutes, but we probably will not use it. So we'll keep it as short
Okay.
as we can.
I'll give you up to 15.
Okay. And to answer your question about Mr. Maniscalchi,
Yeah.
we would keep him separate
Okay.
for 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So go right ahead.
Great. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, and city staff. My name is Rodney Kahn, and my offices are located here in the city of Glendale. And we last presented our project to you back in January of 2020, so over 2 years ago. And as Mrs. Emetitis pointed out, we've spent a considerable amount of time modifying our project, improving our project, and addressing the city council comments as we heard them 2 years ago. To refresh your memories, Ralph and Larry Cimarusti have owned this property for the last 25 years. The brothers were born and raised in the city of Glendale. They've been very active in our community for decades with the Cimarusti Science Center up at Glendale College. This project is being built for their family and for their future generations. A couple important components that I'm going to point out, and then I'm going to step aside in the interest of time. This project has been designed to meet all of the downtown specific plan standards. It is a by right project. We require no variances, no exceptions. We are 100% code compliant. This location, this gateway site that we are proposing is in an excellent location in our city for high-density residential housing, close to public transportation, close to jobs, and will significantly improve our downtown core. A couple commitments we want to make to you up front, and then we can talk about the design. The first is there was a comment, and Mrs. Mataitis read about it, from the Historic Preservation Commission, that upon project completion will nominate the bank building to the National and Glendale Registers. If our project is approved, that's exactly what we would do for that important bank building. The second commitment that we'd like to make up front is that at the Planning Commission, it was very important to them that we would look at skilled labor, local labor, and reaching out to the union groups for the construction, and that's also exactly what we have done. A project of this importance does not get built without skilled craftsmanship, and that's what union labor brings on different components to this project. We are in the process of negotiating a labor agreement with the Carpenters Union to participate in the construction of the project for local labor. What I'd like to do is, in the interest of time, I'm going to step aside and have John Friedman, our architect, walk you through the design of the project.
Thank you, Rodney, and good afternoon, Council. So Rodney, I'm John Friedman from John Friedman Allen Kim Architects. We've been working, serving as architects for this project for the last few years. And since Rodney and Vilia did such a complete presentation, you're going to see a lot of the same images, but I'll be talking about them with a slightly different emphasis. In any case, Rodney talked about height and massing and Vilia changes that we made in direct response to the comments that this council made, as well as historic and design review. And I'm going to move on, since you've seen mostly what the changes we made about mass, and talked more about design. So, and just give you a kind of a better idea. The next slide. So I just wanted, you saw this slide before, but not with the emphasis here, which is that in previous, in the stage one hearing, it was kind of suggested that we look at more of the mid-century buildings around the project, and to mesh more with those. And we did that even sort of directly looking at 550 Brand to see what cues we could take from that. And so we did that. We have this central access that you see to both buildings, stepping back at the corner, celebrating the top, and incorporating color was another thing that we wanted to do, although in all these cases it was done in our own unique way for this particular building. Next one. And you've seen this slide before also, but what I like about it also is that it really shows how much the Chase building and other surrounding buildings are still going to serve as a gateway to the Brand and Glendale downtown. But it also, I like it because it illustrates the sort of 5 goals that we started this project with, even before we met with you all and other boards and committees to celebrate that Chase building. And here, I think really, if it weren't for the Cimarusti brothers, I mean, they're really the ones driving it. They're as you know, they're Glendale sons of Glendale. And then to provide housing, to provide public open space. And then in terms of the last two, to do all of these things with, I call it integrated sustainability and just quality architecture, actually, again, quality architecture that fits, that has the articulation of these great mid-century buildings. So next one, and I think also I really want to say, I've talked for 5 minutes already, that if you look at the site as it is, you look at the Chase building in yellow and you look at the existing two-story building, right now this site is covered with parking. It's all parking, it's all asphalt or concrete. There's a few trees, but there's no place for people. There's no place for community. And so what we're, and you couldn't pass a project like this. In today's world, it's environmentally irresponsible. There's no permeable paving to collect rainwater. There's not very many trees to provide shade and keep you from becoming a heat sink. There's no, trees producing oxygen. And again, on a larger view of environment, there's no places for human beings to meet. And God knows that, we as communities need to talk and meet more than ever. Next one. So again, you've seen an image like this before at the east side of the property along Maryland. You see the blue rectangle, that's housing. And that allows, again, the space, which is now parking lot between the Chase and that building, or Chase and US Bank, to become even more than, I think, the 7,000 square feet that was mentioned in terms of publicly accessible open space. It's more like when you add these other areas that don't count towards exact calculation, it's more like 12,000 or 15,000. And it's actually on both sides of the freeway, of the building. It's on Maryland too. So, and to notice again, it's very pedestrian oriented, but the vehicles only come in and out from Maryland. So we're not going to be, or minimal impact to traffic on Brand. And so this project it's pro-environment, it's pro-housing, it's pro-open space and pedestrian, and we sorely need that. You saw this view before from across the street. We added this gateway just to kind of transition between the noisy street and the park. Next one, you're underneath here. You can see the benefits of planting, seating. There's a fountain, there's a coffee cart, and you're seeing right towards the park entrance into the building, because you can enter on both sides. Then we have the fountain, which provides its own kind of microclimate. It'll be cooler, and the sound will help muffle the noise from Brand. And actually, by the way, this is a great place to look at the Chase building, which you would never do now. You can sit here and enjoy the historic qualities of the Chase building. Next one, again, you see this. Chase building is still going to be front and center. You see the idea of using the louvers, which are really the primary feature of the Chase building, again, on the new building, which is to the left. And you see, and the idea being to show respect for the Chase building, to complement it, but not to mimic it. And that's what the guidelines recommend, not mimicking. Next one, we see now that the louvers are stepping down, the mass is stepping down, and the building's stepping back to reflect the lower density on Main Street. We have started to implement some of the requests from the design board, such as we've kind of screened off the view of the parking, which is on the first 2 levels, or actually the second 2 levels, level 2 and 3. And again, this just reminds you there's a lot of articulation at the entry. All the cars go in and out of Maryland only. I also just like to know, well, we'll just do it with this one, that again, you kind of see the building being divided in a tripartite way, top to bottom, base, middle, top, but also from left to right. And so the central column there of vision glass and spandrel glass to match is its own piece, and on each side is another patterned facade with, again, vision glass for the units, but then white, light blue, and dark blue glass panels. Again, to create this pattern, reflect the sky, and have this kind of unique appearance. You see that again here, all the divisions, all the articulation. I think actually this building is articulated much more than the surrounding buildings, and that's a good thing. The other thing I show here is the location of the pool, and the point here is that this question came up, and I don't think I answered it very well to the design review board, but this is the best place to put the pool for the 500 to 1,000 people that may be living here. And the reason is, if it's on the other side, people from the Chase building or the US Bank building are going to be looking down right onto the podium with the pool. That's not going to be very nice. And likewise, it shouldn't go on the south side because what you see here, those outlines of the orange space, that's still part of the Gateway District. So if we were in those other places, we'd be totally hemmed in. The pool would be hemmed in, dark, and then frankly not have the views that it could have now, which are to the mountains in the north and the east. So that's why we think that by far this is the best place for the pool. You see the pool again here and the kind of amenities that you would expect in a project like this: barbecues, planters, and even in the building or immediately adjacent to this park to this little podium space, there are communities and gyms, and there's the upstairs. There's the dog park. So it's a very communally oriented indoor-outdoor environment. Next one, which continues up on the roof. And I'm about done, but the point here is that the roof is shaded, the amenities on the roof are shaded by photovoltaic cells, an array of a shade made of photovoltaic panels, which will provide, I believe it's 328 kilowatts per day of power, which we think will actually supply enough power to run the pool and also the communal spaces. It's not as much as you'd like, because if you have a tall building without a lot of roof, that's the proportion of roof space to volume of buildings not that high. Next one. But that's just one of many sustainability strategies that we're proposing for the project. I won't spend a lot of time in this, but considering the power, it'll be all electric, and that is to persuade people or to persuade governments to develop more electricity and get us off of dirty power. And that includes, so electric means also the big equipment driving the air conditioning equipment. It also means in all the units, the appliances, the water heaters, those will all be electric. And of course, we'll have electric charging stations in the parking areas and a number of other items to conserve energy, so we don't have to be using as much electricity. And on the water side, we'll also be collecting and reusing the rainwater for irrigation. And we'll be looking into using also gray water and purple pipe systems to also better recycle the water. And miscellaneous materials throughout will be locally sourced as much as possible, recycled with recycled content, low to zero VOCs. And the trash will have 3 chutes to separate, with separate containers for trash, recyclables, and organic waste, because come 2024, this is something that is going to be super important. And really, that's next shot, but I just really want to finish with that. I mean, we've I think, as Roddy has mentioned, and Vilya, we've spent a lot of time on this, really kind of addressing your design concerns, and it's been, I think, really good. I think it's a much better building as a result. And, you know, it takes a whole community to make these things happen. We get to use the computers and run and draw, but really the guidance is super important. So thank you.
We have a question?
Oh, yes.
Councilmember Devine.
Thank you. Done with the design, but and I mentioned this to staff and they laughed at me, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. The rooftop where the solar panels are, and it's just that rectangular, and it just seems kind of uninteresting to me. Is there any way that you can do something? I mean, if you look at what was it? Is it 550? The one that the building next door
with the arch at the top?
Yeah, I mean, if there is, I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying if there's just a way of tweaking those rectangles to make it just a little more interesting, maybe, I don't know, bring it in, or I hate to cut out any of the solar panels, but I'm just saying. Yeah,
we'd be open to those things. Yeah, there's always a way to tweak things a little bit more.
If any of those of you out there agree with me, then just that's all. Okay. That's all. But I'm very glad that you listened to us.
Yeah, we had a complete redesign. So,
I know
because of you, actually. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you. Tony Maniscalchi, we're going to go back to. Are there questions of this presenter?
Yeah, maybe I should.
Come on,
Do you think
come
it
on
would make
back,
sense
Mr.
for me
Friedman.
to
Design.
Oh, I'm sorry.
ask him some questions? Yeah. Let me, hi, thank you for your presentation. So let me start with some of the things you just mentioned, some of the environmental considerations, because I just want to be clear on that. So there's going to be no gas piping at all into the building?
That's what we're aiming for, correct, yeah.
Okay, is that something you can make a commitment for?
I'd have to ask my clients if they were actually willing to
Okay.
make that a commitment.
Okay.
But we're working with our MEP engineers. I just talked to them yesterday. I was like, "Are you sure we can do this?" And they say, "Yeah, we can do. We do this all the time."
Yeah.
And yeah, the chiller up on the roof would be all electric. We do water heaters all electric. The appliances would be all electric. Yeah.
Okay, because, yeah, it's happening more and more, and.
Yes, it is.
So that would be something that's important to me,
Okay.
that there is no
Yeah.
gas plumbing, and that would save all the costs of bringing in
Yes.
gas and bringing it up to all the units.
Correct,
and
yeah.
all that.
Well, yeah, and I just want to be clear, it can be done. I'd have to,
Okay.
our clients
Okay,
would have to be the ones that say absolutely
we'll get
yes.
to that.
Okay.
And then I was happy to hear that, so you are going to have 3 chutes, so every floor, if I'm a resident there, I will be able to have, I'll see a chute for standard recycled and
Yeah,
recycled material.
well, there's going to be 2, we'll
normal
have a third, yeah.
trash, okay. Okay. And then, you mentioned earlier about permeable surfaces, how that's a problem currently. So how is the project handling, getting that rainwater?
Well, the rainwater
into the
that
ground?
drops onto the site will actually be collected into a container, probably in the garage. I mean, right now,
How does that work?
well, even though the water goes through the permeable paving, there's actually a garage below most of it. So actually, then that water hits another concrete surface, and is guided towards a drain, and the pipes, grabbing the water from the drains will take it to these storage containers in the garage, and then they can draw the water for irrigation from those. Right
Okay.
now, the water just goes out into the stormwater system and goes to Glendale, Water and Power.
Right.
Or not, maybe not water, but the sewage, the sanitation.
Uh-huh. Are you going to have, I don't know what the landscape, water requirements are going to be, but are you going to have you talked to the city about having recycled water, delivery?
If we can have
capability?
the water delivered, yeah, that sounds great. I'm not totally, I'll be honest, this is something that I'm a little behind on. So if Glendale will deliver us recycled water, then we will use
Well,
it
I
for
don't know, is
irrigation.
it-
But I don't think they do they?
Are we there? Do we have that infrastructure nearby?
Councilmember Rotman, council members, we asked Glendale Water and Power, and they do not have any recycled water lines in the area at all. So none of the downtown specific plan area would be serviced with recycled water.
I see. Okay, that's too bad.
Probably coming, though.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But you mentioned gray water systems?
Well, again, this is something I could not
Or
commit
did you
to.
not? I don't know if you mentioned.
Well, I
it.
mentioned it. This is something I could not commit to, but you can pipe the buildings to take the water from showers and washing machines, and
Yeah.
then take that down and treat it in your own little gray water system, and then you can run it back up through what's called purple pipe to fill toilets and also do irrigation. It's expensive, but again, it's one of those things that can be done. So, given the situation we have with water in the world, not just
Okay.
Glendale, could be a good thing.
So these are all things
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to be able to nail some of these down.
Mm-hmm.
But, and then just the last thing on this category is, we talked about, you talked about the solar and how much of the energy use that's going to offset. Have you looked at the rest of the property, whether there's an opportunity for solar, not just on the rooftop?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could put it on that little gateway roof, and there's a few other areas, but most of those areas are already counting towards your public open space or your residential open space requirements. So there's really not too many spaces. Although you could take some of those spaces and then shade them with further shades that would have photovoltaics, but it would create a different kind of atmosphere that I'm not sure would be as well received. So yeah, there's always those kind of trade-offs, and
Okay.
so yeah, but pretty much we've covered the roofs. Yeah. So
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we would like to see as little incremental impact on our grid as
Of
possible.
course,
Because
yeah.
we're struggling as it is to be able to meet the loads that we have.
Yes.
I'll probably have questions later, but I'll leave it there for now.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions before we continue? Okay. Tony Maniscalchi.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. I'm Tony Maniscalchi. I'm partner with Systems Real Estate, 700 North Brand Boulevard in Glendale. And for 3 generations, we provided brokerage, management, consulting services to individuals and institutions on a variety of investments in Glendale and Southern California. And for over 40 years, we worked in Glendale. We've been involved in many of the developments throughout Glendale in all categories of industrial, commercial, retail, and multifamily. In the early stages of Lucia Park, we were engaged to provide a demand and benefits review of competitive residential urban developments. Our assignment included an understanding of unit mix, tenant services, and alternative or added sources of income. Over and above the standard amenities provided in most modern properties, we discussed the enhanced services, parking, valet services, cleaning, maid service, pet care, doggy daycare, pet package delivery, media and business center services, gym, fitness and health amenities, activities director, special events, resident engagement, a number of items. Today, many of the high-rise developments or skylofts are institutionally managed, with residents able to access a host of services through proprietary building apps for almost everything, from paying rent, maintenance requests, reserving media or business recreation space, participation in tower events, etc. In addition to reporting on the resident amenities, we were also charged with determining the unit demand. Our findings confirmed that 1-bedroom units are the preferred type, followed by 2-bedroom units, with very little demand for larger units in the 3-bedroom or penthouse style categories. Glendale has a very short list of high-rise opportunities and a very limited supply of any modern high-rise alternatives. As you are well aware, Monterey Island was one, and Pioneer or Park Towers is the other. Both built and as residential condominiums with limited supply of units for rent. Our findings were pretty clear in our assessment that 1-bedroom units are the preferred unit mix here. And while Glendale has done an extremely good job in the past 15 years at providing a strong housing base in the low-rise podium-style developments for our workforce and for our residents, I think for the first time in many years, Lucia Towers will now provide another option for our residents and our workforce for enhanced housing experience with an amenity package
you could wrap
and
it up,
views
Mr. Maniscalchi. Your time is
unmatched for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rodney Kahn, you already spoke. You don't get to do it again. Jared Langford. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Real happy to be here today. It's not all the time that we get a developer that's really willing to work with labor, and the Cimarusti family here was one that did. This is going to be a great project. We 100% support this project. When you have developers that come in and commit to hiring responsible contractors and using union labor, you're going to ensure that these workers on these projects are making family supporting wages, mortgage paying jobs. These workers are going to be able to actually afford to live at this place. We're going to do everything we can to provide local labor. We have 5,000 members that live in the area, and the developer is guaranteed that some of those members are going to be working on this project. We are very happy, and we feel very blessed to have a developer in this city, the Cimarusti family, that's committed to doing what they're doing. When you got workers out there making family supporting wages, it contributes to overall health and wealth of the community. And we believe this is going to be a very, very good project. Not only it looks beautiful, we're excited to build it. It's going to put a lot of people to work. And these aren't just normal jobs. Like I said, these are mortgage paying jobs. These people are going to be making healthcare, and that's very important. So I ask that you support this project and move it forward. And on behalf of the 5,000 members of the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters, Local 661, we 100% support this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael McCarron.
Good afternoon, council members. Michael McCarron with the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters. I ask that you support this project. Like my colleague said, this project's going to create a lot of wealth, put a lot of good, hardworking men and women to work. The Cimarusi family went into agreement with the Carpenters Union. They are going to use construction workers that either participate or graduated from a California state accredited apprenticeship program. And we think this is going to be a good job for the city of Glendale, and we fully support it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Josh Christensen.
Good afternoon, City Council members. Josh Christensen from the Pelican Cody District here in Glendale, California. I love this place. I love this town. And I'm, again, want to echo with my colleagues from the Carpenters Union. We ask that this project, you approve this project and put our members to work. It's a great project. The Cimarusi family has been solid with us this last little while, and that they've committed to use our skilled and trained and folks that are going to go through a state apprenticeship. And we're excited to build. Our members here in Glendale want to build. Members around the area want to build and live close to home and not have to be on the freeways for half hour, 45 minutes, hours at a time. And this will help not being in our cars very much to help the gas emissions go down. So this will be good for the folks here and for our members as well. Also, we need housing, and this will help out with that issue. Thank you much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Catherine Yurka.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Yurka. Can you hear me with this? And I'm a Historic Preservation Commissioner. As you know, the Commission heard this item over several hours, weighed the evidence, and voted 3-1 against recommending the project. The reasons were twofold, as Villian noted. Just two things to add. First, I don't think there's any information in your staff report about the garage that staff did not present to us, and we rejected the idea that it wasn't a significant part of the historic resource. And also one correction, the size, scale, and proximity of the new construction were also the reason why we thought that an EIR was required. It wasn't simply the garage. Last year during the hearing on the project at 534 North Kenwood, the issue of expert credibility came up. It was claimed that an expert who volunteers her time is less objective or trustworthy than experts who are paid to provide evaluations. And I'm not saying that to impugn anyone, only to point out how counterintuitive I think that is. And I was sorry to see staff attack Francesca Smith's credibility here in the claim that her analysis isn't fact-based. To give just one example, Francesca relies on the city's 1970 building inspection permit to date the office building. That permit is a fact. The city relies on a different fact. The LA County Assessor's website lists the date as 1969. Given that my own house was completed in 1942, but the assessor lists the date as 1941, I'm persuaded by the date drawn from the city's own records. But I would never suggest that the date on the assessor's website is not a fact. And I think it's unfair and unworthy of staff to deny that an analysis is fact-based if it leads to a conclusion they don't like. Under SB 375, a SKIA cannot be used if a project has a significant effect on historic resources. And staff don't mention that that's specifically called out. I don't understand how anyone could look at those plans or a rendering and think that this project with the dwarfed office building in the shadows does not have a significant effect on it and will not jeopardize its eligibility for the national and California registers. Having said that, I would like to see housing added to this site. I just think that, again, I've always advocated for a proper process, and I think an EIR is the proper process.
If you could conclude.
I will. And I also just want to say that I understand that there's a substantial in lieu fee involved, but it just seems wrong to me not to have low-income housing on this site. Those wages that this property construction will offer people are not enough to live here, I think, for a lot of residents, and I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Francesca Smith.
Good afternoon. I'd like a half a minute extra if possible, not because I have so much to say, but because I have a disability, if you please.
I'll give you 2.5.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon. My name's Francesca Smith. I'm a qualified architectural historian and historian. You'll be surprised probably to learn that I'm also a proud Local 1000 SEIU member, and I had to take a vacation day to do this. I work for the state of California. I make determinations of eligibility for the National Register on behalf of the state and a federal agency. In that role, I work closely with the State Historic Preservation Officer and her staff. I'm focusing on the project's expected effects on the home savings property. The institutional racism accusation leveled at TGHS by Bradley Calvert is too outlandish to even warrant my response. Regarding home savings parking garage, California Office of Historic Preservation managerial staff member, at least 2 other well-respected architectural historians, Glendale Historical Society and I each disagree with staff and the paid consultant's analysis, which is based on minutia and is indefensible in professional practice regarding the parking garage. Staff's response to our comments asserts that the State Office of Historic Preservation have no jurisdiction over a determination of eligibility. They're exactly wrong. State Historic Preservation staff is not only responsible for reviewing National and California Register nominations, but more importantly, the State Office of Historic Preservation oversees the certified local government program that the City of Glendale volunteers to be part of. The fact that local surveys are prepared in conformance with those guidelines means that they absolutely do have jurisdiction over this. The South Glendale survey submitted to OHP is directed to use criteria that are consistent with the California Register, overseen by Jay Correa, the man with whom we consulted, who said absolutely the parking garage is part of the historic resource. He didn't say only the bank building. It's been attached to a number of letters, comments he had regarding the parking garage, and that it needed to be considered in any environmental clearance. Demeaning my professional judgment and those of other well-respected professionals and excluding the contributing resource by changing the criteria at the last minute or because it's inconvenient to a proposed project is wrong. The home savings, parking garage, and building were completed the same year. They have the same architect, shared mid-century theme, and each was dependent on the other. I'll try to wrap it up quickly. Yes, that building is utilitarian. It's a parking garage. Like most others aren't, it was detailed to match the building. It's unmistakable in that it's part of the historic property. It's not just the building. Calling the information I provided false is insulting, as I said before. Saying that it was missed in the South Glendale survey was my way of being polite to the state, not saying that the parking garage is in a photograph but not included in the South Glendale survey. Regarding the SCEA, we have provided actual fact-based information regarding the impact on the parking garage. I'm not against a project at that location. This project is far too large and doesn't respect the historic property. It needs to be smaller, less massive, and not take over. I sincerely request that you instruct staff to analyze the proposed project's expected effects on the environment. And if you have questions for me, I can answer them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next speaker is John Schwab Sims.
Hello, dear Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council. I'm John Schwab Sims, Vice President of Preservation for the Glendale Historical Society, and thanks for the opportunity to comment. TGHS has 2 major concerns First, we believe the adjoining parking garage is a contributing historic resource. It was built at the same time as the historic Chase Building with the same architect in the same style. The California Office of Historic Preservation and HPC also believe it is a potential historic resource. TGHS strongly recommends that City Council follow the proper process and ask for an EIR based on the proposed demolition of this potential historic structure and the project's introduction of overwhelming mass and scale in relation to existing historic resources. Supplanting this process by not appropriately identifying historic structures because it's inconvenient sets a bad precedent. Secondly, TJHS was very disappointed to hear comments made by Bradley Calvert at the January 22nd HPC meeting. He stated that any opposition to this development perpetuates Glendale's racist past, and approval of this project will help make amends for past redlining practices. With all due respect, we believe this argument is both insulting and disingenuous. It is insulting because wanting to preserve Glendale's historical architecture is not racist, and it paints TGHS as obstructionist to new housing. TGHS emphatically supports new housing and have worked closely with the city in rehabilitating and repurposing existing historic structures. Lastly, his argument is disingenuous, as he stated the project would include affordable units, which will make amends for past racial practices. However, we've learned the new development will not include affordable housing. The developer will pay a fee not to include those units, which in a perverse way further perpetuates Glendale's exclusionary past practices because it doesn't address economic equality or racial justice. This does not offer an amends. We ask the city not to equate preservation with racism and require affordable housing at this site. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Smith.
Good afternoon, council members and staff. My name is Lee Smith. I'm a Glendale resident and a member of the Glendale Historical Society. We appreciate the opportunity to comment on the proposed project. There has been a tremendous amount of recent development in Glendale. While it is good to see that the city has become more reluctant to just knock down old buildings to get them out of the way these days, I think we still need to be more thoughtful about new development on the very few historic resources that remain in the city. After a lifetime in the construction industry, I don't see how anyone can look at the project renderings and claim that the new 24-story building would not impact the historic resource or that it would not swallow it whole, leaving only crumbs. The developer's consultant found it eligible for the national and California registers. It should be treated as a special property that it is. We are all asking that an EIR be prepared. If there are no feasible alternatives to this project and council decides it is in the best interest of the public to go ahead, then so be it. But at least the public would get the transparent and honest analysis of the project's impacts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I have no more cards for in-person speakers. I'm going to turn it over to the city clerk to call the telephoners.
Albert Duarte, you have 2 minutes, Albert, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. And we oppose this project. My name is Albert Duarte, and I represent the Ironworkers, Local 416. We have over 3,500 members. And as our brother carpenters did state, that there's just a portion of this project is union, meaning the carpenters are just like the body. They're the hand, where there's so many more components to the body that makes up of a union and union labor and skills and trades workforce. So unfortunately, we are asking for a win-win in this. Projects like this don't support us all. We've seen projects similar in our neighboring cities that hire the carpenters, but the rest of our union brothers are left out. So we just ask you, commissioners and mayor, to be our advocate in this. Just watch over this and see if we can just develop a win-win situation on this. That we can that this can all be an affordable project and skilled and trained, because skilled and trained is the only way to go. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you.
Kathleen Kaufman, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead. Kathleen?
Thank you. I live at Monterey Island, and on January 18, we wrote a letter expressing several concerns about this proposal. And now that I see the proposal, I'm even more concerned. This building has no architectural uniqueness or interest to it. It's just a massive building. It will terribly increase traffic in that area, which already has an inordinate amount of traffic, and that results in excessive noise and pollution. One perspective that the builders did not show was how that building will be viewed from our building, and it'll just completely block our beautiful view of downtown Glendale and downtown Los Angeles. Is my time up? This is just a massive building that will stand out like an eyesore. It does not fit in that location. This is not a good use for that property.
Thank you.
Luis Porres, you have 2 minutes. Luis, go ahead. Luis? Luis Porres? Luis? Sean Filva? Sean?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Sean Silva with Creed LA. We're speaking first and foremost in opposition to this project on the grounds that our attorneys have duly summarized in their statements on our behalf, so I will leave that to a further on part of the speech. But let me chime in as a person who grew up around here. My mom worked on Glen Oak. We shopped at small businesses up and down Central, Chevy Chase, Off-Brand. The city is a bustling place, to be sure, especially now, but it's not a noisy urban center. To wit, our consultants found that construction noise levels of the proposed project, even next to the 134, would exceed the FTA significance threshold and would be significant, therefore, which the SKIA fails to analyze, disclose, or mitigate. It's worth noting that nearby streets like Louise are still quiet and suburban, even a block and a half away from Glendale's density. But this project brings that closer to those residences. And at 24 stories, which is double the height of its nearby neighbors, that means more noise and disruption and for a longer period of time during construction. Look, the city must calculate project construction noise accurately in an STIR, and it must require mitigation to reduce the project's construction noise impacts to less than significant levels. There's no two ways about it. We're not in support of the project, and we urge the council to reconsider its approval on those 50s. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ray Morales, you have 2 minutes. Ray, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ray, and I'm a part of the Anchor Church. Our church members from all over, as we speak to people all over SoCal, we come to speak out on behalf of our neighbors nearby. Glendale deserves more than this in terms of housing. I mean, it's a lot of units, but none of it's affordable. People should be able to work normal jobs and raise their families and afford to live in here. Please keep those people in mind. Don't let this project go through. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Brian Germain. Brian, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead. Brian, you have
Good
2
afternoon.
Go
My
ahead.
name is Brian Germain.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm here to express my opposition to the project. On behalf of the Sheet Metal Workers Guild and Trained Craft Union, Local 105. Let's be clear. The gold standard for development is projects that work for everyone around them. Most of all, for us, projects are defined by their willingness to give to the community from the start. Developers who won't support the local skilled workforce in the Glendale vicinity are far from doing that. when they don't hire responsible contractors who pay living wages for the job we all do. Skilled and trained workforce is highly important per the craft. Our local union represents workers of the sheet metal workers. Our craft is very specific and requires a 5-year training program to express the difficulties of the craft. One should, be aware of the hazards. Not all individuals are skilled and trained in that specific craft, as I am not skilled and trained in other crafts. But I think it's highly important to observe that if it's good for one trade, it can be good for the others to focus on that scope of work and to perform it to the excellence and provide a gold standard project. Please register opposition to this project, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Samuel Nieto, you have 2 minutes. Samuel, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Samuel, a longtime resident here between Lexington and Doran. Everyone I talk to thinks this project will be a disaster. I'm sure we all know it's not even on a major street, and the traffic circulation will be terrible. Well, for 2 years straight, we can add other construction trucks too, I bet. And the noise and pollution, there are kids who live down the street from this. We oppose this. The neighborhood does not support this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Osborne. Daniel, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Daniel Osborne with the Ironworkers Local 433. I'm happy to hear of the developer's willingness to work with labor. Less happy to hear that the ironworkers were not mentioned in that agreement to work with labor, when we've got mortgages to pay and families to feed and members of residents as well. So I guess my question to the developer would be, if we're serious about working with labor, are we willing to work with all the local unions that have scopes of work on this project, or just one? Because as the agreement stands, me and my 5,000 plus members of Local 433 will have to stand in opposition to the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Zach Strasters, you have 2 minutes. Zach, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Pastor Zach with Creed LA. The city has failed to prepare a comprehensive risk analysis or assessment for the construction and operation of the project. Our experts found that during operation, which is the point where people are living in the building, the 134 will pose a significant unmitigated health risk to project residents. From the National Library of Medicine's February 2016 article, Near Roadway Air Pollution and Coronary Heart Disease, Burden of Disease and Potential Impact of a Greenhouse Gas Reduction Strategy in Southern California. Quote, in 2008, an estimated 1,300 coronary heart disease deaths were attributable to traffic density, 430 deaths in residential proximity to a major road, and 690 to elemental carbon. There were 1,900 deaths attributable to ambient regional particulate matter. You know, the sad reality that we're talking about today is that not only are these deaths preventable by good mitigation at the city level, but also through the way that we perceive every single part of the project's design and development. And what's really being talked about here is MERV 13 air filters as the only means of mitigation, when the reality is that there's so much more needed in that, because the lives of the families and the children that will be living in this high-density project are not being taken into consideration. And it is the city's responsibility to fully analyze and mitigate these impacts in a sustainable community's EIR. We cannot approve this project until it protects the people of Glendale, because they're worth it. Thank you, and God bless you.
Godfrey Wachira. Godfrey, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Godfrey Wachira, also with Creed LA, and also in opposition to the project. As we decarbonize our energy system and increase reliance on electricity for our energy needs, we are running into paradoxical problems, one of which is the need for diesel backup generators. In fact, last summer, the state even encouraged large energy users to shift to in-house generators to reduce demand on the grid. And our experts even found that nearby similar-sized residential towers use these generators. The rich people who will live in this building will also want that backup supply, especially if the building will indeed be all electric, as the developer said. So it's reasonable to expect such generators for this project. But these generators do emit greenhouse gas emissions and toxic air contaminants. Sadly, the city did not consider impacts from the potential use of backup generators and the impact on air quality and public health impacts for this project. We should step up and protect the people, especially when the plan is to also place them next to a freeway. More can be done and should be done in a more comprehensive review in an EIR. And also on a personal note, I urge the City Council, please do not accept the poor door policy in housing. Separating affordable housing from market housing, please don't go down that route. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marco Ruiz, you have 2 minutes, Marco, go ahead. Marco Ruiz? Marco? Bert Culver, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead, sir. Bert?
Yeah, well, I was calling in today about the pollution from the natural gas, and then I'm kind of blindsided by the designer saying that it's going to be all electric. Well, that would be great, but you want the city to approve it before you even have the plans done? Like, I don't understand. In your response to my letter to you, you said that the build-out of the proposed project is projected to generate an on-site net demand for natural gas totaling 730,000 BTU or 700,000 cubic feet of natural gas per year. So that's what you responded to my letter, and now you're saying it's going to be 100% electric. I don't know. I don't think the city should approve this unless you're committed to 100% electric. And at a time when the whole state has committed to going to zero carbon, this means generating 38.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide, which is equivalent to burning 42,000 pounds of coal every single year. On top of that, burning all that gas will release tons of smog-causing nitrous oxides. This is a huge amount of new pollution to release in central Glendale. Also, many studies are showing that burning natural gas in homes leads to increases in harmful toxins in the air. Even when a two-code ventilation is in use, the level of nitrous oxides can exceed the safe levels. Levels of carbon monoxide and formaldehyde also rise. The combination of these toxins leads to increases in asthma and learning difficulties in children. The response to this comment was that residents can open their windows. Well, let's not forget that this building is adjacent to a major freeway. So opening windows isn't going to really help people. At a time when the end of natural gas in homes is on the horizon, we should not be installing more fossil fuel infrastructure. That will only have to be replaced in 10 to 15 years. Many cities across the country have already banned natural gas in new construction, and Glendale is planning to create REACH codes to support developing 100% electric new construction. So this 294 unit should be 100% electric, or it shouldn't be. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Shamari Davis. Shamari?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Shamari Davis, and I am a member of IBEW Local 11, the Electricians Union, representing over 8,000 members. And unfortunately, we are not in support of this project as it stands. I'm calling you to speak on the project. It is important that we can give you, the Honorable City Council, a perspective on the project from a construction industry standpoint. We see projects that will not support the middle-class construction workers who build Southern California, and we know they can support workers but are choosing not to do so for the price point. We come out and let the record show what we believe in. We do not support this project. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Jason Valenzuela. Jason, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Valenzuela. I live off Duran and Kenwood. I can tell you the number one thing I'm worried about is that it's going to be 20 stories tall. That's way too tall. How could we allow it? I'm not sure this project will be a good idea for Glendale. Thanks for listening once again. We don't support this project at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin Kamakel? Kevin? Kevin, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Sure. Can you pronounce your first and last name, Kevin, please? So you have 2 minutes.
Absolutely. My name is Kevin Carmichael. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and staff. I am an attorney with Adams, Broadwell, Joseph, and Cardozo on behalf of Coalition for Responsible, Equitable Economic Development Los Angeles, or CREED LA. CREED LA is an unincorporated association of individuals and labor organizations that includes City of Glendale residents. CREED LA supports sustainable development projects that comply with environmental and health and safety laws. CREED LA opposes this project because the city has not complied with CEQA's streamlining requirements for transit priority projects to mitigate the project's environmental and public health impacts to less than significant levels. The city must prepare a sustainable communities environmental impact report to address the project's significant and unmitigated impacts on air quality, public health, and noise. We submitted a letter today to the city with new comments from our air quality and noise consultants, demonstrating that the city's responses to comments on the SCEA fail to resolve the issues in our SCEA comments. With respect to air quality, the city failed to correct several errors in the health risk assessment. Our expert, Dr. James Clark, calculated that the project will result in a significant cancer risk to future residents from exposure to air pollution from the nearby 134, between 11.1 in 1 million to 19.9 in 1 million, which exceeds SCA QMG's significance threshold of 10 in 1 million and requires additional mitigation. The current SCEA mitigation measure requiring MERV filters is inadequate because it would require residents to keep their windows closed for over 50% of the time to be effective. This is not a reasonable assumption, and additional mitigation is required. Additionally, the SCEA fails to address the air quality impacts from the use of backup generators at the site, which is reasonably foreseeable for a project of this size. And finally, the project will result in unmitigated construction noise impacts. The SCEA contains major errors in its noise calculations, which resulted in noise impacts being substantially underestimated. Our noise
Thank you, Mr. Carmichael. Your 2 minutes is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Flynn, you have 2 minutes. Brian Flynn, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Brian Flynn. I'm an attorney with the law firm Lozow Drury, here on behalf of the Supporters Alliance for Environmental Responsibility, or SAFER. SAFER is not opposed to the project per se, but like others, we're taking issue with the type of environmental review conducted for the project, namely the SCEA. And although many of SAFER's concerns echoes others you've heard, I just want to highlight a few quick issues we haven't heard as much about. So to proceed with the SCEA, CEQA requires that a project must incorporate all feasible mitigation measures set forth in prior applicable EIRs. Here, the applicable EIR is the 2020-2045 Regional Transportation Plan. All prior mitigation measures from that EIR, particularly mitigation measures to reduce greenhouse gas impacts, have not been applied to this project. So using a SCEA instead of a negative declaration or EIR is not allowed. In the city's response to comments, staff claim that mitigation measures from the prior EIR are only required if the project itself will have significant impacts. But that's not what the text of the statute says. The statute says all feasible mitigation measures. And that's because a project can have cumulatively significant impacts, even if its individual impacts are less than significant. And that's why the streamlined SCEA process is available only if these prior mitigation measures are applied to ensure that the impacts of these individual streamlined projects are properly mitigated and not cumulatively considerable. The SAFER maintains that until those mitigation measures are applied, the SCEA is inappropriate. There's also concern that the SCEA doesn't address air quality impacts. We submitted expert comments who found that the project would have significant emissions of volatile organic compounds, diesel particulate matter, and formaldehyde. And these impacts should be adequately disclosed and mitigated in either a revised SCEA or an EIR. So for those reasons, SAFER is requesting the council not approve the project and instead prepare an EIR or at the very least revise the SKIA prior to approval. Thank you very much.
Thank
Desiree
you.
Vicente, you have 2 minutes. Desiree, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Desiree.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Desiree Vicente, and I'm calling to speak about the Samaruski project. I have lived in Glendale for 10 years, and now I love the city just the way it is. I'm not against development, but this building belongs in downtown or something, and I don't understand why or how it could be sustainable. I know people within like 4 blocks will now have like a 24-story building blocking out their sunlight. That's what I know. Take this down a few stories, maybe 10, and then try again. Thanks.
Angel Abrahami. Angel, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Angel Ibrahimi. Living on 222 Falmouth Road, Monterey Road. I'm across from what they planning the project to be. I'm really against that because this whole building is mostly people we are living in this building. They are elderly people. We already having so much problem. We can hardly open our windows because constantly there is a traffic. And if in the morning you see how pollution is on the tables and black on the floors, how is it possible we can handle another 1,000, 2,000 more cars constantly back and forth in this area? I'm begging you guys, please not be political, but please reject this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Luis Porras. Luis, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Luis Porras. I'm a part of Local 761 Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, and as a neighbor and a resident and a member of the skilled trades, I have a misgiving. A project of this size should be built by local hires and at a fair wage. Without a commitment to that, it could be built by out-of-state workers or people driving 3 hours or even more. When they do, there's no guarantee that the money will be recirculated back into the local economy. And if the work is not performed by the skilled trades, what's that say for the quality of the building? But most important, it is, and it won't be, a job that works for everyone in the community. Please don't approve this project. Thank you for your time. Luis Porras.
Thank you.
Gohar Yeremian. Gohar, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Yes, hello everyone. I am one of the owners from Monterey Island condominium, and I would like to, on behalf of our 132 homeowners, and to say please reject this project because it's significantly going to affect southwest side of our building of the condominium. It's going to add pollution. I'm repeating what everyone is saying. But at the same time, it's already a hard time for us to leave the parking lot or get in from the Louis side. I imagine how much impact it's going to be on us, having so many residents living in that 24-unit building. Please reject this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marco Ruiz. Marco, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead. Mr. Ruiz. Mr. Ruiz. Mayor Pro Tem, we have no more callers. That was it.
Okay, thank you to everyone who called and who gave us their cards to speak on this item. Let me go back to council and see if there are questions you'd like to ask of either staff or the presenters about any component of this project. And if you don't have, you had some questions, right? Let me go back to you, Mr. Brotman.
Okay, I have a number of things here, so tighten your seatbelts. Okay, let me ask about something Mr. Manischewski, remind me, sorry. Tony, something that Tony was talking about, one bedroom versus two bedroom and all that. So just one question on that. Did you consider any studios, number one? Number two, what do you think about the argument that, or not so much the argument, but the idea that Mr. Simonian of the DRB raised about this market niche for larger units? I'd like to hear, and maybe it's not you, maybe it's the, the architect or Mr. Khan. But anyway, kind of interested in hearing your thoughts on that, because I watched that yesterday and was curious. Also, unit size. So I know that the minimum unit size I think is 600, more than 600 though. Yeah. Is there a market for smaller unit sizes? I know we have a minimum of 600, but I'm just asking, if that weren't in place, would there be a market? Is there a niche there, and would you consider some smaller units?
Understanding the scope of what my assignment was, and that was essentially market data, and I'm not writing the $225 million check to build it. So that is a big component. But when I looked at many of the competitive projects, West Los Angeles, Santa Monica, downtown Los Angeles, and the ones that might classify itself in the mid-rise category, there are not a lot of singles. Singles tend to go in locations in certain projects in gap areas, and that's kind of where they fit. Now, when you look at a single is going to drop down to about 400 square feet, and I'll let the architect speak to that. But number one, I didn't see that much inventory in the single category, and I didn't see that much demand in the competitive projects that we looked at in that category. As such, the one bedroom just kind of rose to the top pretty easily. And 620 square feet, I think, is the minimum, and it goes to 650 square feet on some of them, depending on the location on the floor. Quite honestly, that's an efficient one bedroom.
Okay, maybe somebody else, maybe Mr. Khan can answer that question.
Councilman Brotman, in terms of our research and what we did, in addition to Mr. Maniscalchi, the smaller units, yes, there is a demand for smaller units. Because usually what it is we're looking at a price point. What can people afford to pay, right? The larger units typically, for the construction, you're basing it on the square footage. You're looking at what that dollar amount is, and you're saying, could a number of people pay this amount? And that being usually for the 3 bedrooms are being very high. If you notice, there's not a lot of 3 bedrooms for rent or for sale because of the price point. If you're looking at smaller units, yes, we could rent those. I couldn't tell you what percentage of the building it should be, but there is a demand for them because they're more affordable.
Because where I'm going with this is, obviously we have a housing shortage. We want more units. We have big numbers that the state is looking at us to produce or to enable. And it's something I've been thinking about. Are we restricting somehow the production of units by maintaining the 600 square foot minimum? And so I really I would be open to the idea of increasing the number of units by making some of them smaller, and maybe there's a market, and that's why I'm asking that. Maybe there's a market for some of these, I don't know what you call them, but I used to call them studio apartments.
I think you also see it a little bit with the accessory dwelling units. They are smaller, which you allow, and you're seeing the demand for them because people need housing so bad. So those units themselves traditionally are smaller than your 600 square feet, and they're doing just fine.
I mean, I would be interested in exploring that. Subject to, I know we have our code, I think, requires minimum 600. But anyway, I would be interested in exploring whether we can either get more units produced, or we can get the same number of units, but maybe reduce the height of the building a little bit by creating more smaller units. So it's something, I don't know where we go with this, but it's something I'm interested in exploring.
Sure.
Okay. If I could continue here?
Yep.
Okay. What, if, a lot of comments came up about why you're not providing the affordable units on site while you're paying an in lieu fee. Can you address that? Why is that? And maybe this is for staff. If the project were to supply those units on site, how many units would that be?
Did you? Go ahead. Councilman Brotman, so I'm sure you're familiar with the inclusionary zoning ordinance. And so it gives you a number of different options, right? So the options are you can build them on site, you can build them off site, you can rehabilitate units, or you can pay the in lieu fee. So from our perspective, we looked at it and thought, okay, this is an option that we have to be able to do that in lieu fee. You, the city council, have been doing a pretty good job in finding sites to build affordable housing units at. I think there's a couple recently off of Pioneer and off of Broadway that you have looked at, and these are very good locations for affordable housing units. This large amount of money helps those projects, helps pays for those projects, which you have decided that you have that discretion to be able to do. The second thing I want to point out, if we did incorporate those units into our project, remember I started off by saying we reduced the mass of the building. We brought it down, the number of stories. We actually reduced it by 8 stories and 85 feet. We also reduced about 50 of the units by getting rid of that mass. If we were to put those units back into the project, you would get that mass. You would get that stories. So in both cases, you would get a massive taller building, and then you wouldn't have the discretion to be able to spend those funds on those other projects that you've already approved.
Right. I understand all that, although having those affordable units would be replacing existing units. You would just be basically subsidizing the rents on those. It wouldn't actually be necessarily adding units.
No, we would be adding units.
Well, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, you have X number of units, you can designate this number are going to be subsidized, essentially, right? You're subsidizing them out of the cost of all the others. That's how it works, right?
If in order for us to make this feasible, we would actually need to increase those units, increase the number of units to be able to provide them on site. Correct. Right.
Okay. I guess my question was really, why did you decide that you prefer to pay the in lieu fee than to put them on site? I understand what our policy is. I understand that we can use it, but all things being equal, I think we probably prefer affordable and market rate mixed, right? That's more what we're trying to get at with inclusion, right?
You know what we really like to do? We would really like to have secured buildings nearby, rehabilitate them, and provide the affordable units in that way, because it's within close proximity in these buildings. But the problem with that is you would have to locate those buildings in advance, study them through your environmental document, and you wouldn't be able to hold them in escrow, if you will, for a few years until your projects come online. So originally, that was our intent. Our intent was to look at other buildings that we could either purchase or rehabilitate or develop affordable housing units in as well. So We needed to make a selection that this ordinance allows us to do, and so we made the in-lieu selection.
Right, and, okay, thank you.
Sure.
Are you, oh, the question was, how many would that translate into?
Councilmember Brotman, based on the inclusionary housing ordinance, it's 50% of the units.
15.
15%. 15 of 294 is 44 units. But as just stated by our city attorney and the applicant, they would have to essentially inclusionary housing on site. So it might be upwards of 44 units. But at this point in time, that's not something that we have calculated or that the applicant is ready to address.
Okay, okay. Let me move on then. Parking, I want to ask a couple questions here. So the project has more parking than is required by code. Why is that? Why would you supply more parking? Because, and I'll tell you kind of where I'm coming from is this whole idea of the SKIA comes out of SB 375, which is all about reducing greenhouse gas emissions by reducing vehicle miles traveled, getting people to use transit, walk, bike, and all the rest of it. Yet we're supplying a level of parking which is really encouraging car ownership and car maintenance on site.
Okay.
And so I'm curious why you are, over provisioning in relative to code, maybe not to market. You can address that, but also whether you've considered kind of disaggregating parking from the unit rental itself. So in other words, you get your unit, you don't necessarily get parking, you pay for the parking spot. And so somebody that doesn't necessarily want to have two cars if they're in a two-bedroom, or somebody that works and lives in Glendale, works downtown, they say, I don't need a car, I can use Uber, I can use my e-bike, they're being penalized. They're paying the cost of that parking even though they don't want to use it. So is there a way to kind of address some of those questions? Because what we really want to do is we want to make real use of this fact that we're near transit, right? And reduce vehicle miles traveled.
Okay.
You see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. So I'll try to answer your questions. First of all, we are providing 38 additional parking spaces. And typically what we find is we have additional parking that the code requires a certain number of parking. Sometimes our market analysis and what we are projecting we may need is a little bit different. And so those 38 parking spaces, if you said to me today, I don't think you need those 38 parking spaces, or based on where you're coming from, I would say to you that we could look at those 38 parking spaces or that space and use it in a different manner. We could use it for storage. We could use it for a whole variety of things that we could look at. We thought it would be nice to have a little bit of excess parking just because we're looking at this project and thinking if we have tenants that may need a additional space, and I understand where you're coming from not wanting to have too much excess parking, that there would be a small allocation for that. Now, having said that, we talked about this as a team the other day. If we look at those 38 additional parking spaces and say, can we reuse that in a different manner? The answer is absolutely yes. We would need to think that through as to how exactly we would want to do that, but we would certainly consider it. That's one thing. The second thing you mentioned about not tying parking to leasing of the units. I have Tony Maniscalchi right behind me that does a lot of leasing, and I would somewhat defer to him, but typically what I'm finding in my projects is at least one space needs to be allocated per unit, because most people are looking for at least one space. The second space doesn't necessarily need to be tied to the lease or allocated. That could be done in a different manner. What we're trying to decide in big picture is, what do we really need for parking? And we have always thought that Glendale zoning ordinances required an excessive amount of parking. We just don't know what that number is, and we're all balancing this or trying to guess on other projects, and that's how we do our market analysis. But right now, I guess, Tony, would you have anything to add to what I'm saying?
I would only add that excess parking will be used in competitive projects, particularly like in Santa Monica. They had excess parking, or they took dead areas of a parking structure, like the corners, which tend to go unused. And walk-in storage closets are now being constructed in those dead areas or in vacant spaces where people are able to store seasonal items at their building instead of going to a public storage facility, or they have locations to actually store their bikes instead of on a balcony when balconies are provided. So that's a revenue source for the building. So if I look at it strictly from a revenue source, the extra parking spaces may not go to a vehicle. It may just go to other components where it's revenue for the building.
Well, what about recharging stations? You can use some of the extra ones for recharging stations.
I think, I'll let them speak to the
Or
charging
bicycles,
stations.
or scooters, or running shoes lockers, or
Well, and you
Stuff,
make a good
active
point about the recharging stations. So what we're looking at, and we didn't mention this as part of our building being energy efficient, because we're trying to race through this presentation as quick as you can. We are also providing 15% of our parking spaces, which is 75 spaces, as electric power spaces. So we're not just plumbing them. We're not just putting that in, because we're looking, as you guys are looking, is that we're seeing this energy efficiency as being what this wave of the future is. It's not just a fad, a passing fad. It's quite the opposite. So we're trying to get behind it as much as we can as well. It's interesting, you asked our architect about, is this a 100% electric building? And I was wanting him to answer that we would love for it to be 100% electric. Until we analyze it to that degree, it may be 95% electric. It may be 98. But the point being is our interests are just like your interests. That's where we want this to go. We just need to take it there and fully analyze it. And it's tough to do because it's a forerunner, right? I mean, we're all trying to figure this out as well.
Yeah, so anyway, that's parking. I would like to see, maybe not a popular opinion, but I would like to see less rather than more. And I would like to see places to store bikes and places to charge bikes, because more and more we're going to see electric bikes. And I think the idea of, of maybe you give people an incentive if they say, I'm not going to take that parking spot. I don't need two, I only need one, or I don't need one at all. Maybe there's some way that the tenant benefits by foregoing that space, which, these spaces probably cost $50,000, $60,000 to produce. When you go down 4 levels, yeah.
If you're at the 4th level, yes.
Yes, they're very expensive.
Right.
Right? And I think it would be a win-win if you could figure out how to reduce the parking and, use some of these things. So I'll leave that there. And that's pretty much what I have. Okay. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, very good. I do want to move this meeting along because we have a full evening as well as a closed session.
Okay. I just have a
Councilmember Devine.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions, and it's pertaining to the EIR versus the SKIA. We've heard people call in, different organizations call in and say that this SKIA does not give feasible mitigation for the impacts, the negative impacts, the noise, the air pollution, et cetera. Is that the case? They're saying that SKIA is not addressing mitigation for noise, pollution, et cetera. It seems to me that I read in here about 100 pages worth of what happens if this is, what happens if this happens, and what about this pollution and that pollution and this noise and that noise, and somebody had to come up to my house where they're building a house and it's like cranes and almost dynamite up there, and hey, what am I going to do? So please, can you address the SCIA versus the EIR as far as the mitigation factors go?
Councilmember Devine, council members, I'd like to introduce Tony Locacciato from Meridian, who would be our environmental expert on staff to answer that question.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. Yes, apologies, we did contribute to the thousands of pages staff asked you to read. I do want to point out one thing too, with this new type of environmental document of SCIA. State law doesn't actually require written responses to comments. That's something your staff wanted to do to make sure you have the substantial evidence required by the laws to support, your determination. So in addition to that large SCIA document, the responses to comments were equally as large. A couple of callers said they submitted new letters today. We reviewed those letters with staff. They're the same comments we already responded to in detail, including doing an additional health risk modeling, addressing every noise comment. To just point out a couple of the comments that they brought up, like related to the health risk assessment, detailed air dispersion modeling, taking into account the diesel particulate matter generated by the 134 freeway. And yes, there's high efficiency air filters, and they said, no, but you assume the windows would be open 50% of the time. No, we have modeling in there 100% closed, 75% closed, 50% closed, 25% closed, all not significant. So that's one aspect. In terms of their noise comments, they got into a bunch of trivia related to FTA assessment methods. They actually wanted to apply an 8-hour average standard. We used the method that has a 1-hour noise standard, which is actually more conservative. We responded to each of their comments. The impacts will be mitigated to less than significant. There was actually a separate question that was related to a unique aspect of SCIAs versus normal or standard environmental impact reports, is that first you go through any prior applicable EIR. Bill, you mentioned we have the SCAG, Regional Transportation Plan, Sustainable Community Standard, Program EIR. We have then the Program EIR was written for your downtown Glendale specific plan, and the one for the South Glendale specific plan. You flip through pages, dozens of pages of tables where each mitigation measure was addressed, and an explanation was provided on if it was applicable to the project, how, and if it's being incorporated in the project, or if it's not, because we don't have a significant impact or it's not applicable. There are many measures in those documents that apply to other types of uses or other types of projects. So again, I appreciate you flipping through all those pages, but each of those is addressed.
Well, was this not available to all the people that have been calling? And
yes, it was.
And all these organizations have seen all of these reports, and they're still saying that it's not enough.
They still stand by their original comments. That's pretty much what we see from the law firms representing the labor unions.
And,
yes.
and don't you think that when SCAG advises and the state that we build units near transportation, they are talking about freeways as well? I mean, you can't just keep them away from freeways, can you? The builds? I mean, Burbank is building looks like 200 or 300 units right on the freeway. On the 5.
It's true, Councilmember Devine, many of those locations are near transit corridors, but actually what's in the regional transportation plan, the reason the project qualifies for SCIA is it's near a high quality transportation corridor, which is Central Avenue, which has existing and planned high quality transit, which means during peak hours, 15-minute headways. That's specifically the type of transit service you need to be near to be a transit priority project and be reviewed this way. So that's the specific requirement.
Then I get to the significant impact on a historical resource. What is an EIR going to provide us? Is this going to be more back and forth? Or are they going? Is an EIR going to come in and say, this is what it is? And
No, as Vilya mentioned, I think a couple things. The analysis, the technical report, and the information in the SKIA and in these response to comments is the same that you would have in an EIR, draft EIR, and a final EIR that had written responses to comments. It was mentioned the substantial evidence standard is what applies to a SKIA, and that says you have facts, reasonable assumption based on facts, and expert opinion supported by facts, and you have enough information to support the conclusions, even if other folks reach another conclusion. So in this case, the staff mentioned they've reviewed it. Historic Resources Group, who prepared the South Glendale Plan Community Survey, looked at this. Teresa Grimes, a separate historian, was brought in to prepare a separate report that was part of the SKIA. They concluded and determined that the parking garage is not an important contributing element to the historic nature of the building. For that reason, the building, as was suggested by the Historic Preservation Commitment, the building alone can be nominated and listed as a historic resource. If you were taking away an element that was so critical to being historic, it would no longer be historic. That's when you're substantially adversely having an impact on it, when it would no longer be a historic resource. So no, this is the same information you would get in an EIR, other than, as was mentioned, you don't have analysis of alternatives, but that's because you don't have a significant impact, so there's no requirement to look at other ways through alternatives to avoid or lessen a significant impact. But every comment that was submitted was taken seriously, and there's a full response to every single comment, and the conclusions are supported by the evidence and the facts.
And this, thank you very much. And this one, I guess, goes to Vilya or to one of our, one other staff. But the fact that a lot of the letters have said that, and I guess Councilmember Brotman brought up the same thing, is to lower the building. And they were mentioning that because they felt that it was shadowing the bank. Now, how low does this building have to go in order to not do that? I mean, do we know that? I mean, how low does it have? I mean, what do we have to take off? 10 stories?
Maybe more.
Yeah, or maybe more. I mean, it could only be 4 stories. How many stories is the Chase Bank? Six. So we'd have a 6-story.
So 24 minus 6 is 18. You'd have to take 18 stories
18
off.
stories off, and would end up with how many? Maybe 50.
Equal to the Chase building.
Okay, yeah. And then that way it would not cast a shadow over the Chase building, and it would not, or is it the Chase Bank? Yeah. Or, minimalize it. I mean, I'm just kind of speaking, rambling on. I guess that's, those are my basic questions. I would like to see Mr. Brotman, Councilmember Brotman's going on what he wants to see. I would like to see all of the unions that have called in. I would like to see all of your contractors be union workers. I think that's only fair. This is our Glendale community. We want to have quality building. If this passes today, if this goes through today, that is something that I would definitely want to see. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you. Mr. Agajanian.
Yes, Mr. Garcia, I have a question for you. I remember previously we have discussed this issue, what it means local hire. It has been mentioned here. How we explain local hire?
I think it depends on the language that we put into, for example, the development agreement. I'm not sure. We haven't really had a detailed discussion with the development team on what they intend by that, so they might have to answer that question, and we'd have to have a discussion
Is your
with them.
microphone on?
Yes, I apologize. It would be, there are provisions that are negotiated in a development agreement or an agreement between two parties that would identify certain trades to be a part of a, locally hired group of workers. I can't speak to it because I don't know exactly what language has been discussed between the applicant and the applicable union representatives. I don't know if Jillian, if you have any additional thoughts on it, but there would be some provisions that would be added to the agreement theoretically. That would be, if the council so directs, that requires that the workforce be come from local workers, and as well as the skilled and trained workforce provisions as well.
Because once I remember we discussed that 15% or 25% should be from Glendale. We discussed this before. I guess we passed some ordinance or something that local hire means part of it should be from Glendale, not local means Southern California, because that's local too.
Councilmember Agajani, the council in the past has had a discussion regarding those types of provisions for contracts that the city enters into. I don't believe that the number was 25%. We never, we did not get direction on that, but certainly I think it's appropriate for the council to ask Mr. Khan what it is exactly that they're hoping to provide in terms of the workforce for this particular contract.
Okay, if they
And
can.
maybe the carpenters union can answer what they mean. What do they mean when they say local hires?
I mean, look, few other people have mentioned also local, so I want to make sure local means also Glendale, not Southern California.
Okay, Jared from Southwest Carpenters, briefly, if you can explain what that concept means.
Absolutely. So we're the Carpenters Local 661, which represents 5,000 members around the area, which hundreds of them live here in the city of Glendale. By them hiring contractors that are signatory with the Carpenters Union, they're going to be pulling workers from Carpenters Local 661, which means that they're going to be pulling members that live in Glendale. We're going to be providing that. So as many workers are available, local residents, to go on this project, we're going to be able to dispatch those members to those contractors to work on that project. So there could be 30% carpenters that are local hire, 10, 15.
I'm talking about minimum. You may take 100%, that I don't have problem.
Well, I would love it to be
minimum.
100%, but there's not enough union jobs here in Glendale to have 100% of the workforce to be here from Glendale.
I understand.
So we
There
have
should
hundreds
be
of
a
workers
minimum.
here from Glendale. They're going to hire contractors that dispatch workers from our local state accredited apprenticeship program. So a bunch of those workers will be from the Glendale area.
Okay. So however, I don't know how we can manage to have some percentage local hire to be like from Glendale. Even though it will be small, I don't want 100%. Obviously, we cannot have 100% employees or those who are going to work on construction to be from Glendale. That's impossible. This is very large project, and I want to see that Glendalians benefit from this project also. I don't want somebody from San Diego, 100% from San Diego.
Their heads.
Anyway, I don't know how we can reflect that. Anyway, the other thing I want to mention, I'm glad that previously there was this curved building and it is gone because it didn't look good. But however, it's this building, it goes along with neighboring buildings, so I'm glad to see that. And I'm pretty positive 100% of local businesses, they're going to benefit from this project because they're going to come here, they will do business, they go for lunch or they buy something. So I think this project will help the businesses in Glendale. And I'm glad because RINA or California asked us to produce 13,650 affordable, not affordable, I'm sorry, housing units. And so this, basically, if it's almost 290, so it helps to reduce that number. So since we have other things to do, I just will mention also that about the parking. I was the one who asked and, right, that to bring the parking in the basement. And you have done very good job. But you left again 2 levels of parking outside the basement. So I do not know. I was looking at the drawings. Basically, you use 4 levels of parking very, I mean, it has done good job. But I'm looking, wasn't there a space, because this property belongs to the owners of the building, is there any more space to expand, whether to the, that would be to the east, I guess south is, you don't have room in south, or to the north? Is there any more room?
Yes, please, that's a direct question, so that gives you the right to
I'll
answer.
give a direct answer. Councilman Agajanian, no. The answer is no, we can't. You are correct. You were the one that told us to put the parking underneath. We absolutely did. You said the residential parking, all the residential parking's underneath. We're 4 floors down. I would be very reluctant to go 5 or 6 floors down. It gets to be way too expensive, way too deep, not something that, we would want to do. We left only the 2 levels of parking spaces for the commercial above ground. So we gave you almost everything you asked for.
But there is no space. I'm not saying go further lower than 4.
There is no more space. To the northwest is the existing bank building, which we are preserving, and we cannot go underneath
to the
that.
west is the building, bank building.
Northwest is the building.
Northwest,
Yes.
okay. But
We have no more
There's
space.
no room in the east. I'm looking at the boundary line. To me, it looks that you have some space to the east. And that's a long way from south of the building to the north.
I wish I could say yes, but I can't. The answer is no, we don't. Thank you.
Wow, okay.
I'm sorry, you done? Are you
Councilmember
finished?
Devine.
No, I have one more thing to say, and then I thought you want to talk about this issue. At last, I want to say, what a great way to honor your mom, Lucia. You are calling this building Lucia. That's a great way to do it. And I hope on Mother's Day, you guys going to do something in front of that building that public can come and enjoy it. Thank you.
I have just a
Yes,
quick
Councilmember
question.
Devine.
Thank you. How long would an EIR take and how much would it cost? If we were to request, deny the SKIA.
Councilmember Devine, since we write them for jurisdictions all over California, I'd say in LA County right now, it's probably 18 months at a minimum, probably 24 months for a project of this magnitude. Updating, we can reuse some of the technical studies, a good amount of them, but they're still drafting, the whole process to go through. Even with the technical information we have, it's probably a minimum of $300,000, maybe up to $400,000.
Oh, wow.
And the time you said was?
Minimum 18 months.
18 months.
Probably averages 24. 36 months is not unusual for an EIR in Los Angeles County for City of Los Angeles, Burbank, other jurisdictions we prepare them for.
Okay.
Can I follow up on that?
Yes, but we have to get this rolling, guys. This is an interesting discussion, but.
Yeah, that surprised me because what I heard was that this essentially has all the elements of an EIR except for the alternatives analysis. So you're saying just the alternatives analysis is going to take 18 months?
Well, it's actually restarting the process because when you prepare an EIR, you first have to start by sending out a notice of preparation for 30 days. Then you've got to sit and review those comments. Time will have passed on the technical studies we've completed, so some of them will be stale. We'll need to update them. New year's worth of air quality monitoring data, et cetera. New traffic counts, because if we just use the studies and you put the EIR out, say 15, 18 months from now, all the comments come in saying the information's out of date. So it's a process. There'll be notice of preparation. There'll be some updating of the studies, drafting of the EIR itself, which is a separate document. So it will be the same information, but it's going to be all new sections, all new writing. It's not just the alternative sections. Then it goes out for the 45-day review period. Then all the comments have to be responded to do the final EIR. So the process itself has all those built-in statutory review periods, and it'll be a different document.
Okay, so if there are no questions, it's time to make final comments, and we'll take roll call after that. So who would like to go first on their comments? You don't have to make comments before the roll call, but if you'd like to, now's the chance to do so.
Let Dan go first.
You want to go first, Dan, since you started with questions?
I will try to be, I'll try to be as quick
Brief,
as I can. Okay.
succinct.
It's hard, there's a lot here. So first comment is, we need the housing, and that's the right place to put it. So I don't have an issue. I think ultimately something close to what we're looking at gets built there. Now, on the design side, I watched the DRB and the HPC comments. I'm not a design guy, so I can't say much there, but I did hear a few people say that they thought that this shift from what was originally proposed, what was it, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, which was more kind of like, what did I hear? I heard the term whimsical, to something now that seems, what I heard from the DRB is it seems a little too corporate, seems a little bit too office-like. And, I'm okay. I think I'm okay, looking at the renderings, I'm okay with it, but I do kind of agree to some extent that it would be great if there was some way to just maybe bring a little bit of that whimsicality back. Not I'm not saying go against what council originally said. I think it's close. But if there's any way to kind of tweak it in some way, and I couldn't even begin to tell you how. But that's one thing I would say. The other thing is I saw the discussion about the placement of the two masses, northwest and southeast versus the idea of going northeast, southwest. I do like the idea of moving the pool closer to where the Chase building is to give it more breathing room. I think that would be a good thing to do, and you would take it away from the freeway, I believe. So I know you don't want, the Chase building, people in that building looking down at the pool, but I don't know. I would rather, if I were in a pool, I'd rather not be near the freeway. I'd rather be on the other side. And I think I heard somebody was talking about the sun would be, you'd get more afternoon sun. So I support that idea of moving those masses and bringing the pool over so that there's more space with the historic building. I heard the comments about the public open space. I support the conclusions or the recommendations of the Design Review Board about putting in a little bit more living material and making it a little bit more of like a place people are going to want to hang out. And no palm trees. I also support that. I think that came from the HPC. Like, let's have shade trees, not palm trees. And then, the sign, the Lucia Park sign, yeah, I mean, it is a little bit overly prominent, I think. I think that could be scaled back. I would suggest that. So that's on design. On parking and circulation, well, we talked about a number of these things I would like to see addressed, the bike parking and all this other stuff. I'd really like to see if there's a way to use to kind of get some savings by taking out some of the parking and reducing some of the unit sizes and be able to maybe scale that building down a little bit. And I'm not talking about getting down to the 6th-level Chase building. I'm just talking about take a little bit of that massiveness out, or maybe move it a little bit away and give a little bit more breathing room to the Chase building. I'd like that to be considered. There was this discussion of a porte cochere, which I had no idea what it was. I had to look it up. But I thought the comments from, I think it was Mr. Simonian principally, and maybe some others on how you handle deliveries with all the now Amazon and everything, that's happening. I would like to explore that, and if it's something that requires a zoning change or something, then or a variance, let's do it. I mean, it seems like it makes sense. If it makes sense, you're going to have all this queuing in there, and it's going to be a mess. That we need to be creative and try to find a way to make that happen. So I'll just say that. And then I think on the environmental things, all the questions I had were answered. I would like to see some of these things nailed down and commitments made before agreeing to a development agreement of 6 years. So that's what I'd say there. And then the last thing, on the preservation question and this question of a SKIA versus an EIR, I mean, I do think that ultimately council will probably end up saying that there is no way to mitigate the impact on the historic resource, and that we will have to agree to kind of override and go ahead with a project. I think that's ultimately where we'll end up. But I feel like really, really uncomfortable kind of just saying outright that there is no impact. I think that we do have to go through an EIR. And I know it feels like a lot of time, a lot of money, and we're going to end up in the same place. But I am a stickler for process, and I think that is the right process. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Go ahead. Okay.
Between you two. Mr. Agajanian.
I just have one concern, as I really appreciate that they came up with the 4 level of parking, but I'm looking at the drawings. I wish I would look more carefully before, but I want to add, if they're going to join my colleagues, to our staff and the developer. To me, it appears there is room to the east, especially this parking level is 4 levels, that the mass and the scaling, if we eliminate the 2 level of parking, this building, the mass and the scale they're complaining, will look smaller than what it is as presented now. So why we don't add this condition to study or look and see they can find to anywhere, whether it's east or north of the building, if they can find the space and expand the parking beyond the building limit. If there is room, they have room.
Yes.
No, I mean, I want to make a condition that they can talk to staff and make sure that if there is a room to eliminate the 2 levels and expand the parking further to the east and to the north.
You mean expand the subterranean
I don't know
parking?
how I can.
But they said they couldn't do that. I mean, we asked that.
No, but I see there is room. They say they can't because it's easier. Doesn't mean that they can't is impossible. It's easier not to do it. That's what they can't. But what I'm saying, I'm not saying definitely do it, but they can chat with our staff if there is room to the east, to the north, to expand beyond the building limit and eliminate the 2 levels of parking. They will be happy themselves too later.
He can make a condition. He can make that a condition
If
on
it's
his own,
possible.
just
To
to,
consider.
just to look into it.
Yeah.
We don't have to, he can just make it. Okay.
You can make that
Make that
amendment at the time of our moving of the items.
Whatever. Yeah. Okay. All right. Me?
That's it. I don't have anything.
Okay, all right, first of all, thank you to the developers for taking council's recommendations to heart in redesigning this building. I really appreciate that. The mass scale, the number of units brought down, compatibility, or, to the reflecting the architecture of the Chase building, appreciate all that. Going above and beyond our green building codes, the solar, the electric, the charging stations, et cetera. Redesigning the subterranean garage. And of course, it's going to serve to advance our arena numbers. I have the list of the recommended conditions by DRB and HPC, and I agree with Mr. Brotman on most of them. The one, provide an appropriate metal mesh behind the louvers, I don't like that idea at all. I think it's better to go with the to redesign the fins rather than just install metal mesh to obscure views of the parked cars. I also agree with revise the design of the vertical fins at the building podium to provide caps with the goal of achieving a more consistent design language. Provide shade trees and not palm trees. I think you could put some palm trees, just make sure, because I love palm trees, but just make sure that you have some shade trees there as well. Let's see, and I'm so glad that you're doing the glass instead of the metal panels. Thank you very much. I think that's a perfect decision. Take into consideration my roof redesign. Sorry. And I would also suggest that we apply for the historic registry for the bank right now. Let's not wait until you're building it or it's been built. Let's do it now to reassure everyone that we are taking into consideration the value of that resource now, and we're not waiting. When I came into this, and I will say, this is my last comment, I was going to ask for the EIR. But I've changed my mind because, and one of the things that changed my mind was Councilmember Brotman's comment that even if we do it, we will probably end up in the same place. My opinion of that is, why waste the time and the money if we are going to end up in that place anyway? So I am going to approve the SKIA and move on.
Okay, thank you. So I was lukewarm about this project when I first saw it many years ago. Let's not forget that this project was fully designed, and we hit the developers with our moratorium for downtown multifamily residential. They came back to us in January of 2020. And at that point, we, took our carving knives out and really chopped up the project and gave them direction, and they came back and addressed every single issue that we gave them at that time. So I'm not sure what else we could ask from a developer other than what they've done. I'm very happy that the in lieu fee is $13.5 million. That's going to get us a lot of bang for our buck, much more than we would be able to do if we incorporated it within that building. I definitely appreciate the green open space. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about green space in downtown Glendale, and we don't have any green space, but this is certainly going to address that. This building is fully by right. They're not asking for any variances, any deviations. They've lowered the height from what they otherwise could have done. The FAR is lower than what they could have done. They've done basically everything we've asked them to do. I do support the suggestions by the Design Review Board, everything that was mentioned here. The efficiency features and environmental features are very meritorious, I think. It's great that we're going to go all electric, or 95% or 98%. It's great we're going to have charging stations for cars and bicycles. And it's great that we're thinking about the water bioswales or the water reclamation from rainwater. I think that's all great. I mean, I don't think there will be any other building like this. Where else would we put a building like this? In Glendale. The only place to put this sort of housing and density is right where it's at. There's no other place that would work. And in fact, I think that's reflected in the requirements and the recommendations of the SB 385, the SKIA requirements. They want to give these projects a little bit of extra oomph and support if it's by a transit line. And we are going to have a transit line. The BRT is going to be it's going to be 2 blocks over on Central going up to Glen Oaks, and we're also going to continue with our B-Line service up and down Brand as we currently do. So I think it's great. I think people that do live there aren't going to need 2 cars. Maybe they won't even need 1 car, and they can make themselves available to all the amenities we have down Brand Boulevard. And that's really a pleasant walk from from where this is all the way down to Colorado with the Americana and Galleria and all that other stuff. You know, the SCEA analysis is going to give us the exact same analysis, environmental review, that an environmental impact report is going to give us in terms of the impact. So kicking it back to an EIR, as many writers and emailers have said, just makes no sense to me. I don't think that the parking garage really can be claimed to be historic. In fact, they are carrying over some of those architectural features, those fins, in where the parking garage used to be. I mean, if you now drive there on Maryland, you're going to see those vertical features. When this is done in 2 years, we are going to see the same type of vertical features, which would be complementary to the bank building. The bank building that used to participate in redlining. So I don't know who said what. I don't know, what is racist and what isn't racist, but Home Savings was one of those banks that did not make loans to people of color in certain districts. So let's not gloss over that part of our history, since we've already come out and acknowledged the sundown town issues that we have had in our past. So I'm ready to go for this. I think it's going to be a great addition to downtown. We've put the developers through many hoops. I think they're sensitive. Oh, labor. I want you made nice with the carpenters, but I expect that same sort of outreach to all those other unions. And there's many. There's the pipe fitters, there's iron workers, there's like IBEW.
Welders.
Welders are probably, I don't know, welders are some carpenters, right? You do welding too. They've got a great training facility. So don't stop and say, oh, it's over, because council can come back and you're gonna need something, and we're gonna be very upset if we get reports that you've cast aside the other unions. And there'll be claims of favoritism to the carpenters, that's the only group that you made labor peace with. So I seriously encourage you to continue those outreach efforts, and it'll only help you in the long run. You want a building that's done on time, quality, no defects. I don't need to tell you. You guys are professionals in that regard.
I want to move the item if you're done.
So there's there's several items, and Mr. City Attorney, do you want to frame these for us?
Sure, I'll do my best, and then I know Joan will have to chime in. So just the first item is the SCEA. That's a resolution to approve that. That should take place first. And then the design review, there were a number of conditions. I know there's some discussion amongst the council members. I think it would be helpful for us and clear for the record to identify which one of those that are on the list that Councilmember Devine read that you want to incorporate, so that we can make sure they're part of them. When you make the motion, whoever makes the motion, identify which ones that are on the list. The council agrees. I assume the council is amenable to the 5 conditions proposed by
Mike?
the staff, recommended by DRB, and then also the ones that were identified by planning staff.
Yes, Mr. Garcia, we actually have a list that we'd like to show to
Sure.
go through that list, and
Okay.
then
Okay.
Well, maybe if the council maybe we should focus on the SCEA first, and then staff can go through the.
Okay. I move the item on.
The SCEA, you're moving
Item 1.
the resolution adopting the SCEA.
Okay, I
And
move the item.
perhaps it should be noted that the SCEA determines that there are no significant and unavoidable impacts due to the project. And so that you are looking at the demolition to not be the demolition of the existing parking garage to not be an impact per CEQA as an environmental impact, that demolition that is. So just to point out and clarify that.
And also that the construction of the project will not have a significant impact on the existing remaining home savings building.
Correct.
Is that your motion, Mr. Agajanian?
Yes.
Is there a second? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Agajanian?
Yes.
Brotman?
No.
Devine? Mayor Pro Tem Najarian?
Yes.
Mayor Kasakian.
Okay, tell us what is on the condition list for,
Know which slide? I can keep going.
Don't know what's going on.
Here's This was in here.
So on the screen before you, you have the 5 original conditions that staff recommended and that DRB supported. I believe I heard council not support condition number 3, and that you would be replacing that with the condition by the Historic Preservation Commission later on.
Correct.
And that condition number 5 is actually, it's a moot point, so we're going to remove that. So we would essentially keep conditions 1, 2, and 4 for the DRB. We would, oh, it's not working to
Yes.
move
okay,
forward?
keep going, we're good so
Okay, here we
far.
go. We would then also include the 2 new conditions from the DRB, which would be to enhance the publicly accessible open space and add additional landscaping, and to revise the design of the vertical fins.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
And then, if the clicker is not moving forward, I'm sorry.
know.
Would you mind moving? Keep
Yeah.
going. One more slide. Yes, correct. So, and then you would keep all of the historic preservation conditions, eliminate or redesign that Lucia Park sign, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not strong on that one.
Me too.
I'm not so strong either.
This is mom's name. Why you want to reduce this?
They're building.
So,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so we would strike that one. Strike number 1. We would maintain condition number 2, which would call for a redesign of the fins rather than just install metal mesh. Number 3 would be kept to include more shade trees. You can still propose palm trees, but you would need to focus them on shade trees. 4th would be to eliminate the proposed limestone and replace that with granite. Do I hear consensus?
Yes.
I'm neither here nor there on that one. I would leave that to the designers or the architect.
Yeah,
You
Okay.
I'm not sold
okay
on
with
that.
that?
And,
Yeah.
and that's actually going back to the condition that the DRB had where, to have a different stack bond pattern or a different material. So we can keep that condition, that the design review board, and
Okay.
eliminate this 4th condition from
Okay.
HPC.
Okay, great.
Number 5, from what I understand, is that it's not upon project completion, but it'd be upon
Now.
project approval,
Right,
Yes.
yes.
if so.
Nominate.
Yes.
the
To
bank.
nominate the bank building.
Yes.
I believe also there were a few other conditions that were done by Councilmember Agajanian that you are also requesting that the applicant consider introducing more parking on the east and north sides if possible, and that would be if possible.
Yes.
In order to propose to eliminate the 2 commercial parking garage levels.
Right.
To then introduce more additional parking if possible in the lower levels, in the subterranean garage,
I mean, in the
or to the east.
in the property, I mean, east, north, or if anywhere else they can find the space. I don't know.
Okay, and this would be a consideration. I heard some comments regarding the bike parking, and just to let council know that there are DSP requirements for both long-term and short-term bike parking. So the project complies with those requirements. So
does it include charging for that bike parking?
it doesn't include charging for the bike parking.
I think
That
that's
would be-
very
no,
important.
I do too. I do too.
So we would include.
They have 38 spaces to work with, right? Yeah.
And this would be charging specifically for e-bikes and not for electronic vehicle charging stations, which, from what I heard, that they are
Right.
already proposing at 15%, which is
Right.
above the minimum 5%.
Is it like a
Okay.
regular plug or is
It's
it
just a
a
regular
special?
plug. No, it's just a regular plug.
And then
It's 110.
I believe, and this is, would you mind, I'm going back to the DRB comments?
Which slide?
Keep going, yes. Oh, too far.
There.
And no, if you can go back. I believe that there was a comment made by Board Member Brotman that, and the DRB had mentioned something about in terms of having the project be too corporate looking. I'm not sure if that is something that you would like them to consider or not.
Let's put it as a consider, not a, because I don't really know how
Redesign all
to
over
define
again.
any of that.
That's
No.
going to be very
No, they can't.
subjective.
Been through that already.
Councilmember Devines do something at the top.
Yes, I would like, yes.
Okay, and then also a consideration to redesign the top framing element to
Please.
perhaps be a bit more
Interesting.
Whimsical.
Whimsical,
and less,
not whimsical, just
less
interesting. yeah.
rectilinear. Okay, and that's. Yes, and there's.
Just one thing I would note on the condition with the nomination, I mean, obviously it can't be done immediately. I don't know what when Jay's talking, but it would have to, you'd have to give them a certain amount of time to get that together. I don't know if, Billy, if you know, on the condition of the nomination of the existing building, how long would that take?
Well,
How long is
they can submit their application. I mean, whether or not, how it moves
Even
through the
that will take some
process.
time, though. I'm saying,
Okay.
if you say it's immediately due upon approval, they'll be in violation from day one. So I just
Okay.
want to give them a reasonable amount of time to apply for that.
How about apply prior to plan check submittal? Would that be?
Council okay with
And
that?
how long is that? How long will that be?
In terms of plan check submittal, it might take a while because they would have to prepare construction drawings, they would have to obtain financing.
Yeah, I mean, they're asking for a development agreement, part because they want to potentially hold off on that aspect of the project, so.
Yeah, so why don't we just do it as soon as possible?
So how about within 6 months? Correct.
6 months?
Months is okay.
Within 6 months.
Okay. Are you okay with that? I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Within 6 months. And last but not least, there was also a comment made by Councilmember Brotman and some of the board members as well for HPC and DRB with regards to relocating the pool deck from.
Yeah.
I'm not in favor of that.
Well, and they said that that would be tough to do, and it would be in the shade, and I don't know that that's, I thought that was going to be one of my questions, was, is it possible? And I guess that was asked and answered,
Yeah,
that
they said
it's,
they couldn't do
you can't do that.
Okay, so
You don't advise doing that?
So no
If I
no
might.
consensus on the relocation of that.
Mr. Brown?
Well, I don't think they said they couldn't do that. They said they like the location best where it is, but I know DRB.
They're being polite, maybe. Can you move the pool?
Can you move them?
It's going to be difficult.
Is it feasible? Let's say feasible. You can, anything is possible. Someone, for the record, please
Yeah.
give us the answer. Is it feasible to relocate?
I guess anything's feasible, but the current location is the best location for the pool.
Because of the sun and,
Everything that was pointed out by the architect when he was talking about it, because of the location of the other buildings, because of the sun, because of a number of different things. It makes the most sense for us there.
If I could, I know that, I think it was Mr. Simonian was pointing out about how the sun moves and that you would only be getting morning sun if you keep it where it is now. You'd get afternoon sun on the pool. Is that correct? And then the other thing was just giving more, I guess, just giving more breathing space to the Chase building by putting the pool over there. Those were the two things we heard.
I'm
I mean,
neither
if you're not-
neither here
if you're
nor
not,
there
you're
on
not,
that
but I'm
one.
just-
Here nor there on that one.
Right.
I can imagine the nightmare of trying to reconfigure.
So with those conditions and considerations,
Okay.
I believe we have a good
Okay,
process.
Okay, I move the item.
Well, let me just check the stuff I talked about with regard to the parking, reducing the parking and considering some smaller unit size, maybe to get more units in there. I think we all want more units, so.
Couple of things, I mean, I don't know, on the unit number, increasing the number of units there could be issues on the environmental review that would at least require a review and maybe an addendum to the ski that we're just preparing, and we can do an addendum, but, so that's, I think the staff is gonna be in the position of maybe not recommending that. I don't know how the applicant feels about that. I know applicants love more units, but I think it's from that point of view, we might be in a position where we're already having to look at whether or not a larger project with small units requires additional environmental review. So I would think maybe a consideration, and then the staff can work with the applicant if they're interested in seeing what would be required.
That's a major design change. It will be big. I mean, to design again, there will be major change in the building.
But once you build it, we're going to have it for a long, long time, so
I know.
we want to get it right the first time. But I'm happy to leave it as something that's discussed, considered
I mean, if you want
without.
to say encourage them,
Look
that
into
way they
it.
can look into and see what the ramifications would be if
The
they're.
other thing is small units would require either a code change or a variance. So that's another aspect of it that I don't
Correct.
think.
Okay,
And
yes.
yes,
Really.
Councilmember Brotman, in speaking to your point with regards to raising the density, increasing the number of overall units, that would also trickle down in terms of the open space requirements. So they would have to look at their open space requirements because there's a per unit for residential open space. So that would affect the residential open space. That would affect the parking requirements as well. So currently, the levels that are subterranean in the residential, I'm not sure if you increase the number of units, there's a trickle-down effect for all the various development standards in the DSP. So, and rest assured, I think it would affect the SKIA. So we would definitely have to.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to work.
That's like redesigning.
Yeah, I think that's.
Okay, well, maybe we can just put this on a future agenda to look at some of these standards that we have so that we can make this possible in future projects.
Right.
Definitely, we can address that. And last
That's
but
why we had the moratorium just
Yeah.
in 2019.
And last but not least, there was a comment made in regards to the porte cochere, which is basically sort of a drop-off area along Maryland Avenue. That is not a permitted use on a residential mixed-use street in the DSP. So that would require a variance.
And would we do that?
Well, a variance would not be under the review authority of the city council, and you would not be able to address that right now. It would have to go under a separate application and analysis. Perhaps if you'd like to say consider.
Yes. How's
But
that?
knowing that this
Consider.
is something that the city council is requesting, that would be a deviation from code.
Okay.
Consider. They can
So
consider.
we couldn't force them to apply for a deviation from
No.
code.
Correct.
They can
We
consider.
could encourage them to look into that and do that. Okay.
So.
That's the best we can do. So add that as a.
So now I can move the item?
Okay, with all those conditions that we just went through, do we remember them?
Thank you. I think they're
Who
pretty
remembers?
thorough.
Nobody
Let's-
Just
remembers.
say, so moved.
They're on the record.
With all those,
Yes.
we just discussed, you're going to move the approval of the Stage 2 design review.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Agajanian,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Devine,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Najarian,
Yes.
and Mayor Kasaki.
Are we going now?
And we need someone to introduce the ordinance for the development agreement.
I will introduce the ordinance for development agreement.
Okay,
Second.
so we don't need a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was introduction.
But that concludes our business on this item?
Unless there are any conditions on the development agreement that the council wanted included in the development agreement. I say that while telling you any substantive change to the development agreement would be required to go back to the planning commission, depending on the nature of the change. The only change I heard, or only suggested comment has to do with the labor provisions. I'm not sure if the council wanted to include anything in the development agreement, or if you were just asking the applicant to go back and work with the other groups in addition to the carpenters.
They already promised here.
So let's encourage
Yes,
them.
and
Let's just
I
say that
have-
it's strongly encouraged that they return to all trade unions that would be participating to seek agreement with them.
And I have another suggestion that possibly we could add to that agreement, if possible, that the 13.5 million go towards affordable housing. So that we have that.
It has to.
It has to.
It has
Okay,
to.
perfect.
I-
Okay.
If I might, just one thing that I wanted to nail down, the fact that it's 100% electric
Yeah.
as a condition for the development agreement.
All right.
If,
So I introduce it.
I can tell that now.
I think what we heard from the applicant was that they are endeavoring to do that. And it's their goal to meet that. That's what they've said. That's what Mr. Khan represented. It's certainly council's purview to require that as an additional condition.
No fire pit on the roof?
No what?
No fire pit on the roof?
No fire pit on the roof.
I mean, that would be.
Right, right.
Spoil sport. No, I'm kidding.
We lived before fire pits.
condition?
Oh, my, look who's back.
Oh, well.
Do you
is that
accept the
something we
condition?
support?
Yeah.
No fire pit? All electric?
Because this
As close
project
as they
will
can,
take,
yes.
this project will take at least 6 to 10 years. This is not going to come easy back.
It's gonna take
This is
Yeah,
6 to
let-
10 years project.
Maybe there'll be radiant heat, lava rocks with radiant heat.
That's-
and,
As
I mean, that's the alternative.
Are they okay
candles,
with it?
get as close to 100% as they,
Yeah,
as they can.
this is good idea. As close to 100% maybe.
Put that in there. We'll provide these changes to the agreement and when the ordinance comes back into,
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
so it's been introduced.
So
Yes.
Someone
So
move that, with those
Yes.
recommendations.
I move
Second.
that.
Second.
Oh, it was introduced.
Oh, that's right. Oh, it's just
Oh,
introduced
yes. the
again.
ordinance.
That's
Okay.
it.
Okay, that concludes our action on this item. Thank you very much, everyone. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the special meeting is adjourned. Do we have a closed session that we're going to read
We have
into?
one that we need to get through, but it should be quick.
Okay, call to order the Glendale Council meeting for June 14th, 2022. And we have roll call.
Councilmember Agajanian.
Present.
Brotman. Here. Devine.
Yes, here.
Mayor Pro Tem Najarian.
Here.
And Mayor Kasakian.
Will you read the closed session item, please?
One would be closed session, 1A conference with legal counsel pending counsel with legal counsel.
folks.
Anticipated litigation, significant exposure litigation pursuant to paragraph subdivision D2 and E2 of the section 54956.9, two potential cases.
Do you anticipate reporting out?
A couple things, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. So it'll just be one case, and for the minutes, it is regarding a notice of violation received by the city by the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board regarding a complaint that the city is not in compliance with stormwater discharge regulations applicable to Grayson Power Plant. That'll be the only item we'll hear, and we do anticipate reporting out.
Okay, we recess the closed session.
Mayor Pro Tem, did you want to announce starting later with our regular council meeting?
How long will closed session be? Sure. I mean, is 6:30 going to work?
Yes, 6:35.
6:30. We're going to return at 6:30.